The Ukrainians out at the same time.
Yeah, how unfortunate, right?
Yeah.
But at no time was there any, oh, Russia's okay. This is all Ukraine's fault. So politically...
Let's record this.
It is recording.
Okay.
I gotta finish my burger here. Hang on.
While you're doing that, let me throw something at you that I've been thinking about. What if it's not Trump loves Russia so much as Trump hates Ukraine? Because again, I cannot, I'm looking to try and find why would Trump love Russia so much? Why would he want to help Russia? And then I'm wondering, well, maybe he doesn't necessarily want to benefit the Russians so much as he just wants to see Ukraine utterly destroyed.
I don't think there's any questioning, through both administrations, like the first one and this one, that Trump has a hard-on for Putin.
I don't know.
He admires him. He praises
I think he
him.
likes Putin. I think he likes and respects him.
So some of the stuff he's done is questionable, like having meetings, but sending the American translator out of the room. Right? This was back in the first administration, right? I don't know. I just find every time I find.
So what is the benefit? Let's ask the detectives questions. Chi bono? What is the benefit of Trump giving, really, as you say, having such a love for Putin? What does he get out of it? There's got to be a mechanism. There's got to be a reason. There's got to be an intent.
Well, this is where we start delving into anyone who's looking at, Trump as an asset, Trump being compromised. Right? And that's actually
okay.
that's coming out more and more then.
Well, because it's starting to look that way, right?
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, so what kind of compromat would you need? The other thing is, if you're Trump and the Russians have got something on you, why would you run again? Because now you just give them leverage over you again. In 2020, he's out of office. The Russians, what are they going to do to him? Nothing.
But there's other motivations for being an agent, right?
For being
an asset, right?
Okay, let's hear him.
He could not. They may have any compromat. He might just be willing, right?
Okay.
Like the Walker spying, right? There was no compromat on John Walker.
They just wanted
to do it.
Okay, so why would Trump be willing to sell everybody out for the sake of the Russians, but then not for anybody else?
That I don't know.
See, that's where it kind of falls apart for me. The only way I can make sense of this is he hates Ukraine. Because then everything makes sense. Everything makes sense in that regard.
I think you're right. We were talking earlier. I think like Trump 2.0 is this is obvious. Is very different from Trump 1.0.
Yes,
and I think his motivations are very different. And
yes,
this is. I think you're right. I think this is Trump the revenge tour.
Yep.
Right.
He is lashing out against all the people who, this is the wounded narcissist.
Yeah.
All the people who enraged him
in the first one.
In the first tour.
And he thinks cost him his re-election and all
Yep.
that stuff.
He is now looking to destroy. And I think Vance, Hegseth, Gabbard, they all have different motivations. Mm-hmm. They're all thinking long term, not Trump.
No.
Trump is thinking the immediate next 8 years, because he's probably dead in the next 8 years.
Yeah.
So he's looking to just get payback. And so that's why I'm thinking, Musk actually does believe in the role of Doge, that they have to reduce expenditures of the American federal government or the nation is going to be destroyed in 20, 25 years. He believes that. Mm-hmm. I don't think Trump cares.
No.
Trump wants to destroy the American public service because they
came after
him in 2016.
Yeah.
So I think maybe if I look at this war in that lens, it's not so much that he loves the Russians. He hates the Ukrainians, and that he will help anybody who is anti-Ukrainian.
Yeah, I think he has an affinity for Putin anyway.
I think he likes Putin.
Yeah,
because I think he sees a bit of himself in Putin. I'm also going to throw a dart. I got zero evidence for this, zero, none. Mm-hmm. But I'm wondering if, there's a lot of Russians involved in New York real estate. Mm-hmm. I wonder if he maybe rubbed elbows with those folks back in the day. And then he came to have an appreciation for their bluntness. Let's delve into Russian cultural stereotypes here.
Right.
And paint with that really broad brush that's full of inaccuracies that I love so much. and in blatant naked stereotypes, but maybe Trump appreciates the stereotypical bluntness and direct in-your-face nature of Russian emigres, and that maybe he admires that culture and that he is familiar with it, and he knows nothing about Ukrainians. He doesn't know anything about Ukrainian culture.
No.
But he understands Russians and Russian culture. And so that he naturally is predisposed, like just from the get-go, he was naturally predisposed to kind of see things through that prism.
Yeah. I think the other thing, going back to Trump's history as a Manhattan developer, like he has come up in the literally the zero-sum game, right?
Yeah.
Like, so he views everything as zero-sum even when it's not, right? But being a Manhattan real estate developer, where everything is already developed, and if you want to do a project, that means you have to knock something else down and rebuild it, and 19 guys are competing for the same spot of land. Yeah. It is literally zero-sum.
Yeah, you're pretty cutthroat.
Right?
Yeah.
But then you start to look at everything as zero-sum when it's not. When it's not. Right?
Yeah.
Like trade.
Yes.
Like his fundamental, his understanding of the economic realities of foreign trade don't seem to be like.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't make you say, oh, like we have a trade deficit with Canada. Well, there's 340 million of you and 40 million of us, so you're going to buy more stuff from us than we're going to buy from you, just because there's not as many of us.
Yeah, there's just not as many of us. Yeah,
Right?
exactly. Yeah.
China stole all our jobs. Okay, but I can buy a new 55-inch TV from Amazon for $470. I don't really want to pay $4,700.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
that TV,
Yeah,
right?
you just can't. Like, they have no environmental legislation whatsoever. They have no health and safety regulations. They have no fair labor, or they have no labor law. Like they don't even have rule of law. There's no way you're going to be able to compete with them in manufacturing.
And then there's China.
Well, that's what I mean. That's China. Like,
make joke.
Well, okay. Like, there's no way you're going to compete with them. In like, that's the whole point, though, is that they are a workshop for you.
Yeah.
And the conservative, the fiscal conservatives are the ones who let that happen. They went out of their way to let that happen. Manufacturing, they offshored all their manufacturing. They got rid of all. The failure was
what's more efficient, right?
They didn't cross-train
right
their society to kind of move into something else.
Yeah, into, say, more complex and, say, the German school, more complex and detailed manufacturing that an economy like China, India, or Brazil simply cannot do. We never did that. We instead, number one, our education system can't do that. Our education system moved away from STEM to more values-based education probably 50, 60 years ago, probably in the Quiet Revolution. So we were never going to be able to make that transition. In other words, the fiscal conservatives, absolutely made that say, let's globalize and let's all become like macro efficiency and let China do what China does best, and then we can do other things best. But they did not have control of the institutions they needed to make that change. In other words, the education industry was outside of that project.
Yeah.
And they were never able to support that transition. The best we could hope for was, well, we have a low-skill workforce now. Just that we have is just as much a low-skill workforce as China does. In fact, you could even argue that China's workforce is probably more skilled than ours, as in North America. But our costs are so much higher because of our regulatory burdens that we have placed upon our economy. So all we could transition into was business services and low-skilled service industry jobs.
Yeah.
And that's the main reason why our average median wages have been in constant decline, because we're moving to lower and lower and lower skill. Like, that's all we can do is lower and lower skill.
Yeah.
Economic activity.
Yeah, that transitioning of low-skilled manufacturing just literally really hollowed out the middle class, right? And the middle class, I don't know that anybody realized.
We don't have a middle class anymore. I mean,
well, to be honest, that term is a misnomer. Like, really, what middle class is the bourgeoisie.
Yeah.
You have You have the poor, you have the working class, you have the middle class in the British European sense, which was the entrepreneurs, the white collar professionals, and then you had the aristocracy. We had such prosperity from say 1945 to say 1970 that we began to confuse the term working class with middle class. And I think now that end of that brief golden age, right? We're still readjusting our terminology. Our working class is getting hollowed out.
Yeah.
Like our middle class, in the proper economic sense, is alive and well. The white collar professionals are thriving. It's the working class that is getting obliterated.
Well, I think it's great to hear you call it the golden age when we had a substantial middle class when there was unparalleled working class prosperity. Yeah, and so and that's the other thing is, I guess when I think working or middle class, I'm thinking of this white collar and blue collar as well. Like there was a certain amount of a standard of living that.
Yeah,
that had
the
our
working
blue
class,
collar,
the physical labor, the class that muscular labor, as Hansen
calls it. Yep.
The muscular labor class was making incomes close to what the white collar working class was making.
I mean, consider what a working class person did in say 1905 and 1925. Consider the houses they lived in.
Yeah.
Consider their mode of transportation. Consider their modes of recreation, and then compare that to a working class blue collar guy in 1960. Well, the guy in 1960, he owns a much bigger home. He actually owns 2 automobiles. He actually has a vacation.
Some do, not all, but
the
some.
Vast majority. The vast
many more than did in 1905.
Exactly.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Like the concept of the family road trip comes into existence at that point where, hey, we're going to load up. I mean, the existence of the station wagon that, was created to fulfill that need. Like, hey, honey, we're going to throw the kids into the car. We're going to drive, to the beach. We're going to, the existence of the motor hotel grew up because you now had all of these people in the working class, this great prosperity, that they could have recreation, they could have travel, they could have vacations that we had never seen before in that period. And it created a change in mindset to say that no, I'm not like my grandfather. My grandfather, he was working class. Like, I remember the way my grandfather lived. No, me in 1960, I'm not that. I'm above that. I'm middle class. When really it was a misnomer. The middle class is the white collar. And I'm speaking like let's be very specific and use proper economic terminology. The middle class is your white collar professional entrepreneur business owner who no longer works on the tools, who doesn't actually do the work, but plans, allocates, records, and strategizes the work.
Yeah. Okay. And now you're not just talking entrepreneurs. Now you're talking management.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, white collar professionals. So it wouldn't just be the entrepreneur, but it's the lawyer, it's the accountant, it's the sales manager, it's the planner.
Servant.
What's that?
The civil servant.
The civil servant. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But
we'll circle back to that.
But hold on. A distinction does need to be made. There's the civil servant who's the plumber and the electrician who works for Public Works Supply and Services and has their hands on the tools.
Yes.
But there's also the civil servant who is the planner, the manager, the accountant, the strategist, they work with accountants, like the purchaser, guys like that.
Yeah. Or the civil servant who drafts regulations at
who simply creates
X ministry,
who just creates scope.
And
this is why we offshored our stuff to China, because we simply legislated ourselves out of competition of the global marketplace. Said, let's create a whole bunch of things that cost money but add nothing. And that's what we did.
Well, I mean, so there were 2 things that came out this week that we traded back and forth. So I'm going to start with the one that I sent out.
That rash. No, sorry. I thought you were talking about that strange itch. Yeah.
No, the one about I think it was the professor at UT or whatever who was giving the lecture. And
Who was that?
I don't know. Like I said, I shared it because it seemed to cover an area that we typically butt heads on. Right?
Yes.
And it just, for me, it had some talking points. Right now, the thing that resonated for me, and I'm not going to be able to pick apart, many of the details of it, because there was stuff he was throwing. It's like hanging out with you. It's like you're throwing, you're name dropping all the time. Who's this Pickety guy? Right? Like, fuck, I have no idea. Right?
He's on your side.
Yeah,
You should know.
I would have thought that you would have owned a copy of that book.
Yeah.
It was kind of seminal. Really.
I don't own any books.
Oh crap! I've got your book and I left it at home.
My book?
Yes, I bought a book for you. It's. I mean, I'm on a budget here. It's a secondhand book, and there's some writing in the margins of the first chapter, which is what you could tell all the kid was required to read for his economics class, and then he never touched. Chapters 2 through 9. But no, I bought you.
Copy of Basic Economics by Thomas Sowell?
Economic Myths and Fallacies by Thomas Sowell.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Interesting. I'll give it a read. So, anyways,
And I didn't bring it. God.
what struck me about what he was saying was, and I don't want to get into picking apart all the details, but I'm just this is what struck me. He's talking about how the tax level for the upper classes at the time was 92%.
Yes.
No, 93%.
Yep.
When someone complained, it brought down to 92%.
Yep.
And this was under Eisenhower.
Yep.
Right? So that struck me. And then everything he talked about how that's where we seem to have a golden age, right? And it lasted, and he he had all these things that kind of came to a peak in 1973, right? I thought that's interesting,
Yep.
right? And then because we've discussed that in a number of ways, how we lived through the golden age, like we lived through the good years as a generation, right?
I think we just kind of came I was born right at the very end.
Yeah.
But our parents did.
We were already in the Malaysia area by the time I was born, so
Yeah.
I was 75, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, you young pups. Yeah,
I was 71,
bullshit?
right at the very, very, very end.
Yeah, you and your bullshit about the Smitty's retirement fucking. Fuck you, because that ain't me neither. Yeah, so you can just forget that.
For those of you listening, Trent just threatened me with his cane. He's got that aluminum one with the 4 prongs at the very bottom.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The stability one, yeah.
Yeah, that's what he kind of shook at me. But he had to stop because he almost lost his upper plate.
Well, that end is kind of heavy, too.
It is. You can see that chicken wing under his arm, that you get when you're like, what, 75?
Yeah.
Anyway. I got a story. Can I throw this in? Just sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
Since we're talking about old jokes. Okay, so there's this captain at work. He's a retired chief, or a former chief warrant officer, right? And he runs the jock, and he's retiring in 3 months, and this end of the road CRA kind of thing, right? So I always make jokes about him being older than me, and how he's an old man, Smitty's senior menu, and I'm always trading I'm always throwing these barbs at him. And when we do the commander's update brief every week, I have to prepare my products, but what they do in the jock can't be done until I do my part, right? So just to get up get away from my desk a little bit, I like, instead of just emailing him or phoning him, I like to get up and just walk to his side of the building and just say, hey, I'm done. You can do your thing. And I always like to throw little, comments about him being old. And so I'm thinking, okay, what can I say? What kind of cheap shot can I take? And I need to get some material here. And of course, I'm just on autopilot at this point. And my boss works in that corner of the building too. So I just kind of walk, on autopilot. Instead of turning right to where the captain is, I turn left and go to where my boss's desk is. And I'm walking, and I come out, and I'm standing looking at my boss's cubicle, wondering, what the hell am I doing here? Why am I standing here? I thought, oh yeah, I was going to make fun of somebody else for being old. Uh-huh. Yeah, I guess I'm not doing that now. Et tu, Brute? So yeah, that's the old age jokes for today.
Yeah.
Well,
so please, go on.
I'm sure we'll have lots of opportunities. But
Golden
the other thing
age.
is, some of what he was talking about just kind of resonated with me, because it points out how the gap, all the numbers, all the ratios, all the you do the subtraction, whatever, all the gaps between rich and poor nowadays, and how they've just gotten so much worse. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he took them back to like 1920s. Right. We haven't been in that position for like 100 years.
Yep.
Right. So that's what really struck me about that is, and it's one of those things we keep butting heads on. When I talk about, dealing with the right, especially the fiscal right, and the top 1%, and we'll get to that with the parasites later. It's like playing chess with the devil, right? Because they're in control of the rules.
Okay.
And they keep fighting to maintain that control so it benefits them, right? And
who's they? Which, like,
the 1%, the rich.
Okay, so you think they still have that control and that power?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I won't dispute that.
Flipping it around, the other thing, the thing that Steve posted, the Jordan Peterson piece about 65% of managers being useless.
Providing negative value.
Was that? I didn't catch that one. I did. Maybe I didn't get it. Maybe that one didn't come through.
It was a small blurb.
Can you give me the Reader's Digest version?
Yeah, he said 65% of managers
provide negative value to
their companies. And he said one of the reasons
agree with that.
And one of the reasons for that, and this was magic to my ears, right? The people who actually do the work in any organization, however,
it's always a square, because he went from there on to how the square root of the total number of employees do 50% of the work.
Yeah,
right.
So it's like your Pareto principle.
If you've got 100 people working for you, 10 of those people are doing half the work of the company.
Or I heard it was like 20. Yeah, like out of 100, 80% are just moving stuff east-west. The 20% are doing, or what is it? The 20% do more than 80%.
No, I think it's 20% do 90% of the work, but 10% do 50% of the work.
Okay, yeah, I go with you on that.
Right.
I go with you on that.
So
and the larger the company, the more true that is.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, and from there, what he went into. So, and this wasn't something I could respond to with the text to you guys, right? But then he goes, well, so is Elon going to find $1 trillion or $4 trillion or whatever it is within the next month?
No.
And he says, we'll have to see, right? Now.
Yeah, because he doesn't understand the economic realities of the U.S. government, which is
huge.
Well, that and everybody, at least in what the conservatives and the libertarians I listen to, all agree that if you're not going to touch Social Security, you're not going to touch Medicare, and you're not going to meaningfully touch military spending, you
got nothing.
Yeah, you're done. You're failed, right? The Social Security is, I think it's within a decade it's going to hit insolvency.
Yeah,
it's like 7 years now.
Yeah.
And every time there's like a little, we'll raise the rate or we'll have to contribute more or something, and that pushes it back by a year or 2 years or something like that. But it's within the decade, Social Security to be insolvent. Medicare and Medicaid are they're massive. And the reason they're not 50% of the budget is because they don't have universal health care coverage, right? Like what is health care in Alberta now? Is it like 65% of the
It's last I saw, and this is a couple of years ago, but it's generally been consistent. 45% is education, 45% is healthcare, everything else is the last 10%.
Right.
And it's pretty consistent across provinces.
Yeah.
Pretty consistent.
So, but my thinking was, I've got a real problem with inefficiency, and the numbers we've heard about how the civil service has grown in this country.
Oh yes,
in the last
across the Western world
in the last 10 years. Well, in our country in particular, but in the last 10 years,
right? Particularly in the
when I heard those numbers,
in the Trudeau government, the numbers like 40%. in just the Trudeau.
I thought it was actually closer to 60 or 67%.
Or
Like
what I
the
heard was-
number was
yeah,
ridiculous.
What I heard was like a 41% increase just during the Trudeau administration.
I mean, that's just
Utterly
that's
unsustainable.
fucked up. Yeah, absolutely unsustainable.
massive.
Especially when they're all union jobs and
Yeah.
they've got good rates of pay.
Yeah.
Right.
And fully indexed pensions.
And in the meantime, service has gone down, quote unquote service
Yeah.
has gone down. And that only got worse with COVID, since COVID, because now it's
Yeah.
like, well, now they're all working from home or you can't go into the offices, right? It just, but my thinking was there's no way he's going to find efficiencies if he's just going in and gutting departments, right? If you're just getting rid of numbers,
Yeah.
because
I
don't know.
I think
he will.
because Elon,
I think he will.
I think looks at things like he has to make mistakes because he's not going to learn anything if he doesn't.
That's true. That's true.
Right? Like
yeah.
his motto at SpaceX was fail quickly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
You fail, you iterate, you retry,
Yep.
you fail, you iterate, you retry.
Yep.
And so you don't learn very much from success.
And this has also never been done in human history.
right? And and also government.
Ralph Klein did a pretty good job of it.
Okay, you're right. You know what? I'll
Yeah.
take that back. It's never been done in American history. But yeah, you're right. Ralph Klein did do it.
Yeah.
And
Ronald Reagan grew the size of the U.S. government.
Thatcher did a little bit.
Yeah.
Thatcher did a little bit. But no one has ever done this in American history.
No.
No one has ever tried. And again, this is two people I can think of in history, period, that since the creation of the welfare state have tried, even attempted to roll back the size of a Leviathan.
Right. And so
No one in America has ever tried this before.
Yeah.
So, and the example Peterson gives is, when Musk bought Twitter, he just got rid of 80% of his people.
Yeah.
Right? It's not the same, I think, when you go into something as onerous as and
Service
as broad
provision.
as something as you
Yeah.
call, government services.
Yeah.
Right? Because first of all, you have to be careful. As much as possible, you want to be able to identify and hold on to that square root that's doing half the work, right? So you want to make sure you hold on to that. At the same time, you can't go into any service assuming it's a useful service and just kind of go and fuck with it, right? Because that's not efficiency. Because now all of a sudden, who's doing what was being done, what isn't being done, what
I don't know
what
if they
becomes the
have
failure in
time
the
for that
system.
analysis.
Yeah.
They've got 2 years. That's it. They've only got 2 years to do this.
Well, I think Musk himself technically only has a year.
Well,
because of his status, like being a
Could be.
special employee, all that stuff,
Yep.
right?
but
So-
also the midterm elections will come,
Yeah, midterms.
and they won't be able to do anything.
yeah, because they're gonna. They're probably
Every president loses loses
You're
either
gonna
the
lose in the
Senate
next-
or the House or both.
Yeah, they're
the midterms.
definitely gonna lose at least one.
Yeah. So
body.
everything that Trump's going to do, he's got 2 years to do it.
All
Yeah,
right, but
but
if-
so what Musk has been doing, what Doge has been doing, is they go in with a computer and their little
Yep.
virus, and they go straight to expenditures.
Yeah.
What
What are we spending?
What checks is this department writing?
Yeah.
And then they're pumping in keywords,
Yep.
usually having to do with DI and stuff like that.
Yep.
And anything that hits their keyword search, they stop immediately.
Yeah.
Right.
So
And
it's
I think-
very crude. They're taking
Oh,
a
it's-
chainsaw
Oh, yeah,
and not
yeah.
a scalpel.
Well, and so Milei at
Yeah.
the CPAC came to CPAC and gave Musk a chainsaw. And
Oh,
Musk
yeah?
has been prancing around with his chainsaw.
Wow.
It's freaking hilarious.
That would have been probably a moment. Did he do it on stage?
Oh yeah, no.
I
Musk
bet you.
has taken this chainsaw to other events.
Yeah, but did Milei give him the chainsaw on stage?
It wasn't on stage. It was in like some
okay.
conference room, but there's a whole bunch of cameras in
oh
there.
my God, I
Yeah.
bet you the crowd would have went.
Yeah, like he had a
nuts.
crate, open it up, and this thing is chromed.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, so what they're doing, I think Musk is like, okay, first stop the bleeding,
Yep.
and then the screaming will start, and then we'll be able to
And then
assess
we'll-
from the screaming
yeah.
like who's
What needs to
valid.
be
yeah,
fixed in tranche 2.
yeah,
Right.
and then undo stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Fine. Yeah.
well,
yeah.
it's, so to me, it's like potato. If you're going into it, if you're saying, okay, the midterms are the issue, right? I've gotten to
Yeah.
that.
He's
Well,
got
if you
he's
fucked
got
up-
a
if
time
you
limit.
Fucked up the services completely, to an extent that they're not effectively doing their job anymore, then you're going to lose the votes anyway.
But
Yeah, but
if he
he's
fucks them
gonna
up
lose
quickly,
anyway.
if he fucks them up
Okay.
quickly and then unfucks them
Yeah,
quickly,
but again, you can't.
Right?
You're never going to win the midterms.
yeah,
No sitting president in history has ever won the midterms.
All right, so I just heard you say Elon has no reason to do this effectively.
No, he does.
No, he doesn't.
He does
Because he's not going to get the votes
He does.
anyways.
He does have a reason
he
to
can-
affect,
he's
but
not
it's
running for
not an
election,
option.
but-
It's not an option.
He can fuck this up any which
It
way
was
he wants. He's
doing
because
it.
they're going to lose the votes.
Doing
anyways.
it methodically and say with the minimal harm and disruption was never an option. It was just never an option.
I suppose that is the nature of politics.
Yeah, like even more so. Like most administrations, you got 4 years. You got 4 years to do what you're going to do, and you can kind of take that fourth year off the table because you really don't want to rock the boat in the last year of your administration. Like you don't want to do any ugly, like difficult decisions in the last year because you're looking forward to your next election. So kind of go ugly early is definitely a rule. You got to really tread lightly on your third year, but generally, you want to do what you really have to do in your first 3 years. Because of the American system, where the legislative is going to be taken away from the Republicans in 2 years, no matter what happens. It's just like in Canada. If you are a liberal candidate running for a provincial election, you're in tough because Canada almost always elects parties that are not the prime minister. So if, say, the prime minister is a conservative, you do not want to be in a conservative party on the provincial level because we tend to pick provincial governments that are a de facto opposition to the federal, right? It's just a matter of
Except in Alberta.
Except in Alberta, where we've had a traditional, or say in BC, where they, well, no.
Alberta's
BC
pretty unique.
Alberta's a unique kind of a one-party
I don't know of
culture.
any other province like it. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Quebec is very similar. Look how long the Union Nationale ran Quebec. Look how long the NDP has run BC. Provincial governments tend to be dynastic. In certain provinces like the Maritimes and Manitoba and Ontario, they flux a lot. Like they do flip. But you'll find that they flip according to what's in federal politics, not so much what's in your domestic politics. And even within your domestic politics, if you look at Alberta's Conservatives, when did we have the most moderate premiers? When we have Stephen Harper in Ottawa. Like we had Ed Stelmach, we had Alison Redford during that time period. So it still holds true even within the paradigm of party politics.
I don't think Alison Redford was a moderate.
Well, she was the most left-wing.
She was left.
Yeah, hard left.
She was not a moderate.
Yeah.
She was not a moderate by.
It's not an accident that she came to power within the conservative movement
Sure.
within Alberta when we had a conservative prime minister.
Yeah.
Wasn't Stelmach immediately after Getty?
Yeah, he was very soon after. Or, no, not after
Immediately after.
Getty. I think after Klein.
Yeah.
Was he?
Yeah,
Yeah, because Klein was after Getty.
yeah. But
Was it?
Yeah. At any rate, my point is that there are certain things, certain trends that you have to plan on not being able to buck them. And this is a reality in American politics. The sitting president is going to lose the Congress
Yeah.
after the midterms,
Or part of it.
or part of it, like enough of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Because
So whatever.
they've got a 1-seat majority in the Senate.
Yeah.
And they've got like
Yeah.
5 or 6 in the House.
Yep.
In the House, they probably lose the House and they might keep the Senate.
Right.
But who knows? They might lose both.
Yeah, exactly. They're probably going to lose at least one, and that's enough. All you need to do is lose one.
Yeah.
What
and
does it
then-
matter?
Well, then you're stuck.
Because you don't
Trump's-
have the legislative.
Trump's still going to be Trump. He's still
Right.
going to be doing executive orders.
Right. But he will not, like, a Democrat Congress is going to stifle him the same way the Republican Congress stifled Obama.
Yeah.
No matter what, the legislative branch still controls the purse.
Yeah.
It still controls the money. And this is what Doge has had in that recent court case where they lost their ability to shut down USAID by the Supreme Court in a 5-3 decision, where the Supreme Court, where 2 conservative justices sided with the 3 progressives saying, no, they're constitutionalists. According to the Constitution, Congress allocated that money for that purpose, and the executive branch
Doesn't get to
may
say
not.
no.
does not get to say no.
Yeah.
Only the legislative branch gets to say no. And so, of course, this has caused the MAGA people to, and I don't think that's a bad thing, to retool and pay more attention to Congress and say, okay, it's not enough to simply put one guy in the White House. You need a political movement. We need to hold, or, we need to use the legislative branch and put our, like what Ramaswamy is saying, this needs to be done at the legislative level.
Well,
so
a lot of it needs to be done at the legislative level.
So we'll see where that goes. But as far as Musk is concerned, he has to be reckless. He has to be, how would you say, like crude, like non-specific. Like he's got to take a chainsaw instead of a scalpel. He's got to be rushed and reckless simply because of the realities of the American political system. So there. So I don't think you're wrong.
And he works in a hurry anyway. He always.
And as you say, this is Musk's personality.
Yeah.
Fail early. So I think he is more than willing to say, go in and just cause absolute chaos and havoc, because rebuilding the public sector after the midterms will not be opposed by the Democratic Senate.
No.
Like if you say, okay, we do need to add some more people. We need to, like we cut too much here. We need to replace that or rebuild that. Democrats aren't going to stop you from doing that. They will stop you from cutting a single position.
I guess part of it is at this point, what occurs to me is I don't give a shit what happens to those fuckers south of the border because they did this to themselves. And, and the way they're behaving, like
that's not fair.
Trump shouldn't. No,
that's not fair.
It is
there
fair.
are three different entities down there. One is the Trump administration and the hardcore MAGAs. Mm-hmm. Next over is the Republican Party.
Yeah.
The third is
who
the
absolutely suck.
Sure.
They've just put
Then
up
the
with Trump.
third
They've
is
rationalized
the American people who are not lockstep behind Trump. You're writing off the entire Democratic Party and something like 48% of the American population who voted for them.
Everyone who voted for Trump.
Yeah,
right?
and
they willingly.
What percentage of the American population do you think that was?
Don't know, don't care.
You should.
Somewhere enough to get Trump reelected.
Yeah, but
and now the rest of the world.
You're writing off half of the population.
The rest of the world is seeing the effects of doing that, right? And so that's like all the glee that came from everyone. Oh, we owned the woke.
So
right?
should we
That's
write
great.
off the Canadian population? Write off the entire country of Canada because it elected Trudeau 3 times? Like, does Canada deserve to be like absolutely obliterated because it did elect Trudeau 3 times?
My pushback on that is the Tory party completely failed to bring someone to oppose them, right? And the other difference is,
Democrats completely failed to bring.
I live in Canada,
Uh-huh.
right? So
you're just othering 340 million people?
Yeah.
Yeah, I am.
You're just going to other them
because the impact of that has been profound, absolutely. We're 2 months into, less than 2 months into the second Trump administration.
Yep.
And he's exhibiting all the narcissistic, aggressive, buffoonish behavior he did the first time, and those cunts reelected him. Right? What the fuck were you thinking, United States of America? Right? In what way
do you think
was it
they
supposed to be a
elected
good
him?
thing? Like I said, it's one thing to own the woke and be able to go, woo, yay, we owned the woke. Right? I'm going to argue at this point that they should have gone with Harris.
Why do you think they didn't?
You can't rationally interpret the insane.
So you think it was a mass insanity, that there was absolutely no rational reason to vote for Trump?
I think the U.S. has been a sick society for quite a while.
So
it's just been showing itself.
So
Trump is a symptom of a very sick society.
So it was like a national malaise, racism, sexism, insanity, or mass formation psychoses.
I do not agree with the woke. Like I said, I'm just saying, of the two choices they had available, Trump was not the one to go with.
So,
and we're seeing that effects, and this comes back to what you were saying earlier about, him hating Ukraine more than he loves Russia. No, right? everything he's doing right now is to, best case scenario, tolerate what should be perceived as his enemies.
Yes.
And to completely go after everyone who he should be seeing as an ally.
As his friends.
He is completely destroying everything the U.S. built in the interwar and post-war period.
Yep.
Right?
But would you at least entertain the possibility, or would you reject this out of hand, that part of the reason why people voted for Trump was a failure of the Democrats to let American working class thrive? That is it at least possible that the Democrats had bad policies? Is that at least like on the realm of possibility?
Very possible. If you'll rewind to what I said, right? Of the two options America had available to it, they chose the wrong one.
Yeah, but you didn't say that the Democrats didn't provide good governance. You said America's a sick and broken society.
Yeah.
And so, well, you don't, like, I don't think they're a sick and broken society. I think it's the Democrats failed to provide good governance. They did a terrible job. They did a terrible job.
In one Biden administration.
Yes, the Biden administration did a terrible job.
And then the Obama administration before them.
Did a terrible job. And that's why Trump was elected the first time.
Yeah.
Was because they couldn't control their spending. They couldn't.
We could recognize that Trump is the symptom of the disease and not the disease.
Disease itself.
He is a symptom. Sure.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
right, like Trump is the immune system overreaction to an allergy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The allergy or the allergen is bad government.
Yeah.
And Trump is the immune system over response.
Yeah, totally. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
And this is why I think the left keeps spinning its wheels.
And so if we'd rather have Jeb Bush, or we would rather have what's his face, Ron DeSantis, or we'd rather have any number of people, more normal traditional conservatives, because Trump is not a conservative.
He is not.
Despite running for the Republican Party, he's not a conservative.
Yeah.
Like we can come up with any number of people, or even people like if Kamala Harris had, instead of picking Waltz, she'd picked Jared Polis from Colorado, or Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania. That would have been a much more palatable ticket to millions of other Americans.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
I think so.
What was Waltz's...
Waltz is the most progressive governor in the United States. Like, even more than Gavin Newsom. Like,
oh, okay.
Literally. Like, people don't understand that Minnesota is, like, deep, deep blue. Like, they're freaking communist. Like, they should be.
They're a very deep blue state.
It should be.
You didn't
the state flag should be red and yellow.
Say communist.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did.
But he's definitely...
I see this everywhere on the left. There's absolutely no introspection to say, okay,
no, there should be.
There should be. But this is why they keep spinning their wheels. They're saying, what are we doing wrong?
Yeah.
That we're not winning the people. Like, what of are our policies not getting, like, we think we're doing a good job.
Yeah.
But why don't the people think we're doing a good job? Yeah. They don't look at that. They just say, well, the people are stupid, ignorant, racist, and they're not worthy of us. And this is why they keep going.
And this goes back to their what they think trust, where they think trust should be directed versus where trust is actually directed. Right. So the progressives feel that like certifications and what's the term they use? Accreditation, right?
Yeah.
Like you should put your trust in people with accreditation. You know, if they get Harvard degrees or Ivy League degrees and this and that and that, you should put trust in the quote-unquote experts. Where trust is actually placed is in people will put their trust in someone
experience
and in what they think but also not in what they think he'll do for them, but what they think he won't do to them.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
I go with
the
that.
people, like the Democrats, the progressives feel that you should trust me because I have this degree and therefore I'm very qualified to do this stuff. And the people put their trust in this guy because I don't want him doing any of that.
Yeah.
And I don't think this guy's going to do that. Yeah. You have told me that you're going to do stuff. And despite your degree, I think you're still a moron.
Can I also place a huge amount of blame at the hands of conservative parties?
Sure.
Of people like Jason Kenney, Stephen Harper, Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson, in that...
Boris Johnson, for sure.
100%. In that these people promised change, that, okay, we're going to roll back the Progressive Project. The Progressive Project took society in a place where the working class did not want it to go. And they said, okay, we're going to change it. They didn't. They simply said, okay, we're not going to let it continue to get worse, but they didn't make it better. Yeah. Not only that, they refused to do the things that would make it better, and they pushed them outside of what is acceptable politics.
Yeah, outside the Overton window, yeah.
And the case in point is Europe, in that you want to make the AFD go away, they're a two-trick pony. Crime, immigration. Yeah. Same thing with Vlaams Blok in Holland, or Geert Wilders, and Sweden Democrats. You want to make them go away?
And probably, what's your face?
Meloni.
Le Pen.
Or Le Pen, yeah.
Right.
And Giorgiana Meloni with Northern League or whatever they are in Italy. You want to make them go away?
Except she's the Prime Minister of Italy now.
She did get on, yeah. But like, you want to make those parties go away?
Yeah.
Stop immigration, get tough on crime.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all you got to do. And they disappear. Yeah. But the political right, the establishment right, the moderate right, like your Christian Democrats in Germany, your liberal parties, those what are ostensibly
the centrist parties, or
the conservative parties of Europe,
right,
refused to do that. And what you said to the populations was, you can't vote your way out of this problem. When guys like Putin come along and say democracy doesn't work.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of people saying, yeah, you're right, it doesn't. We vote to solve these problems, and we have a choice of
the people we elect.
Make it worse slow, make it worse fast.
Yeah.
That's all we have. Democracy's not working. So they say, you know what? I'll pull the lever for something really crazy and radical, like Trump, like AFD. Well, you know what? I don't blame, say, the Liberal Party for doing Liberal Party things. That's why you joined the Liberal Party. You knew what you were going to get. But I 100% blame a guy like Johnson or Sunak for saying, oh, no, I'm a conservative. When really I'm not.
Yeah, indistinguishable from Labour almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Other than the anti-Semitism.
Or was it the only difference between the Conservative Party in the UK and the Labour Party is that the Conservatives drive the speed limit.
Yeah.
They're not they're not batshit crazy like Labour is. They're not sane, but they're not batshit crazy. Like, they won't make it better.
Yeah, they're not drooling.
Yeah, they'll just make it worse slower.
Yeah.
So anyway, Trent, you're looking at me like you can barely contain yourself.
No, I don't even know where to go with that.
I don't even know where to go.
It's like
that mainstream conservatism has failed, basically.
Yes, mainstream conservatism
because it's, it's morphed into progressivism light.
Yes,
as opposed to being distinct.
Yes,
right.
Well, I think, and
it has abandoned Edmund Burke.
The concept of progressivism, again, as I've pointed out, my feeling has always been that human history has been eternally about progressivism.
Well, that is what defines progressivism, is the belief that human history is moving towards a predetermined or known destiny, a gnosis, so to speak. And that's what defines progressivism, that history is moving towards a goal.
I'm not talking about looking forward. I'm not saying this is the goal. What I'm saying is...
it's moving in a direction.
Evidence-based.
Yeah. This defines
looking at history, this is what we've done.
Yeah.
We're no longer sitting around a campfire eating raw mastodon meat because we only just discovered fire, so we haven't learned how to cook it.
Well, it failed the environmental assessment, so it took a little while.
So, we went through all these things, tribalism and
this
empires.
This is what defines the progressive,
right? So, no,
that is the doctrinaire. This is what defines progressivism.
I call bullshit on
the belief that
you're not
human history
you're not gonna
has followed an arc. This is not me. This is political science 101.
This is from the guy who's telling me, well, I don't believe that Hitler and Mussolini should be considered part of the right because I just don't believe they should be.
No.
But that's how everybody
you have
else.
heard my evidence for that, and you refuse to engage. I've challenged you on that, and I say, well, then answer me this, and you're like, oh, I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah, the reason I don't is because I don't know where to go with it. You just
know where it's going to go with it, Trent. And you don't like where that is.
You just uttered the magic words. It's not me defining this. This is what everybody else says. So my response to you on Hitler and Mussolini, are they right wing? Fucking right, sir.
Okay.
Every
Why?
fucking political science.
Okay.
Thought
Let's
for the
go
last
there.
200
Let's
years
go there. Who's
has
on the
had
right?
them there.
Mussolini, Hitler's on the right. Who else is on the right? Name me 2 or 3 guys on the right.
Pinochet, Franco.
Okay. The other fascists. Okay. Name me somebody who's not a fascist who's on the right. Anybody.
Like an authoritarian?
No, not a fascist. We're going to say fascism is on the right. Okay. What other movements are on the right?
Conservatives.
Okay. What do conservatives and fascists share in common? Okay. Like what do they have in common? Start with economics. What defines conservative economic policy? What defines fascist economic policy? And show me a commonality between the two.
There isn't. Again,
There
because then we talked about the axis.
No, don't muddy the waters, buddy. Political. Where does political sovereignty lay?
We've had
With
this.
fascism?
We've had at least 2 episodes.
This is what I
on
said.
this.
You refuse to engage. Answer the question. What are the similarities between conservatives and fascists in terms of how decisions are made and where political sovereignty lays?
All I'm saying is, you came to me and you said, "I don't write the rules, Trent. This is what everybody else said."
You're refusing to engage.
Everybody else, no.
You always talk about,
I'm not going to play chess with the devil. You are.
There is no ambiguity.
Right now, you are.
The only ambiguity is on that side of the table, and you create it because it benefits you.
I'm challenging.
I'm laying out everything, and I'm responding, and you're backing away.
Shut the fuck up for a minute.
You're backing away.
I'm not backing away. I'm calling out the hypocrisy here. All right?
Now who's moving goalposts?
You pigeonholed
Yeah.
progressivism. You just attempted to pigeonhole progressivism
Yeah.
as saying, well, that's a progressive way of looking at things.
Well, yeah.
Right? And I started to protest that, and you said, well, listen, this ain't me writing the rules.
Okay.
This is how it's been defined by other people
Okay.
in books
Okay.
and as definitions. Okay, hold that thought.
Okay.
All right? So you're using that as an excuse to say, Trent, you can't argue this. It's not just me saying this, a bunch of other people. I'm saying
Okay.
Hitler and Mussolini are right-wing
Right.
because
Everyone else says that.
everyone else has said that. Books and fucking...
Okay.
And all right? So that's what I'm saying. Okay, you can't have it both ways.
Oh, okay.
Right? You
All right.
can't...
How about I retract that then?
Retract what?
So, okay. You said that in your mind, being a progressive is looking at the long trail of human history.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, then what are you saying?
What I said was, in my opinion, human history has been nothing but progression.
That it's been
That's all.
that human history has been a movement toward. Well, no, okay.
It's just been
It's just a progress.
historically.
Towards what?
It's just a bunch of
But
whatever it's decided it's going to move towards.
because I did not understand what you were saying. I thought you were saying that human history has over the long. To paraphrase Obama, where he said that human history, the long arc of human history, bends towards justice. That is a fundamentally progressive statement.
I think it's a very motivating, it's a very moving statement. But that's
But you would not agree to say that that is a fundamentally progressive idea.
Ooh, I don't know how to answer that. I mean, maybe it could be characterized as such.
Okay.
That's
what I thought you were saying.
All I'm saying is, if one looks at history, the progress over time of human history has also been, in general, a progression of improvement.
Now, are you saying technologically or socially?
Socially. Overall,
okay.
socially. Right? And technology has played a big part in that. Right?
So like fire.
Fire, the wheel, Industrial Revolution, right? And there's a lot of gray area in between those
Velcro.
two things, right? Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I mean, it's, you can name your poison there,
Yeah.
right? Human history has been nothing but
Okay.
progression, right? What's happened, and this is circling back to another thing we've been kind of dancing around today and a few times in the past is I felt for the longest time until very recently that the left had the moral high ground. You said something in a text recently about how the left is very hypocritical and the right takes hypocrisy very seriously. We don't
Yes.
define ourselves
Yes.
in it, right?
Or basically to say that hypocrisy is not an important concept on the left.
Well, it should be. And so the funny thing is that up to, let's say, at least 15 years ago, right? Just to be safe, I'll put it at 15. I would have said that I felt the exact same way about the right.
Fair.
And I only need to pull out.
You felt that hypocrisy did not matter to the right.
Or that the right embraced hypocrisy.
Oh, yeah, the bunch of hypocrites.
Can I steel man my statement, though, from the left point of view? Just for the sake of clarity?
Okay.
That the left did not care about hypocrisy because the left said every situation must be viewed on its own merits. That what is appropriate, what a policy or guideline that is appropriate in this situation is not appropriate in that situation. For example, the right likes to look at things in terms of principles that apply universally. A one size fits every single occasion. Whereas the left says, no, life is way too complex for that. Not everything is the same, and that we must tailor make our approaches and our solutions to different problems, taking into account different realities. So a leftist, for example, can say, absolutely, when abortion is concerned, my body, my choice, but not vaccine mandates, because they're two totally different things. Whereas the right looks at that and says, that's hypocrisy, because it violates a single common principle. Whereas the left says, no, we don't need a single unifying common principle that applies in every single situation of life. Life doesn't work like that. So that's where I'm coming from when I say hypocrisy does not matter to the left.
No, it's okay. So interesting. I would not necessarily characterize that as hypocrisy. Again, up until 15 years ago, right? When we talk about the concept of common sense, and that's what needs to be applied to both the scenarios you just described, right? It's great to have ideals, right? But if you make them broad and that prevents you being able to
see the forest for the trees?
Critique them rationally and go, no, maybe this isn't working over here. We need to kind of refine this a bit. Like if you're just like, don't touch my Second Amendment rights, it's like, who's that Australian guy? Jeff, he's got the great piece on gun control.
I don't know. A comedian?
Right?
Or,
yeah, he's a comedian.
I don't know.
Jim Jeffries.
Don't know.
Oh, you should watch his piece on gun control, right? But at one point he's like, you can't change my Second Amendment. And he's like, yes, you can. It's an amendment.
Well, yeah, you could.
Look up what the word means.
Yeah, you could. And this is an argument in the United States to say, look, quit fiddle farting around with trying to do it through the back door. Just come right out and propose a constitutional amendment. Remove the Second Amendment. Like, just be upfront about what you want to do. Use the legislature.
So getting back to it, left, right, hypocrisy. I would call it paradox, first of all, right? You have to be able to deal with paradox. That's part of it. Because you can't just make these broad statements and that's all that matters, right?
Like, say, broad principles.
Yeah, it's great to have them, but then you have to be able to pragmatically apply them. Right?
And so this is why when the left does this, the right interprets it as hypocrisy. Whereas the left,
And yet,
that's not the lens in which they view the world.
and yet the right still tries to claim common sense. Let's use some common sense here.
Common sense is not common, my friend.
Exactly. Right now, everyone's been trying to use that for the last few years. Right, both sides of the fence, and I think more appropriately by people such as us who talk loudly in restaurants, like. As the moderates in the middle, kind of going, let's apply some common sense here, right? Because that's what's missing. So whenever I hear anyone from the right say, well, let's apply some common sense here. Oh, okay.
Right.
To me, that's the same thing.
Right.
It's
Common
like,
sense according to your specific values or principles.
You've got this broad ideal,
Yep.
and now you want to talk common sense.
Yep.
What the fuck is it?
Yeah.
Right?
Common sense to two different people are going to be very different things.
I've
or
always-
common sense to a guy in the Chamber of Commerce and a guy in Greenpeace are going to be two radically different concepts.
So so where I've seen hypocrisy on the right, and you don't have to go very far as far as I'm concerned. If you want to talk historically, you've got any white kid that gets charged with rape, but he's the captain of his swim team, went to a good school, his parents are rich, he's going to get a suspended sentence, right? Black woman registered her kid, lied about her address, her kid ended up in the wrong school zone, she's going to jail for 3 years, right? Where the fuck is the justice in that, right? And that comes back to what we were saying, let's be tough on crime. Well, let's be clear.
Yep.
Let's be clear what we're talking about. Are we going to be tough on all crime? Or are we just going to keep picking on the blacks?
In those instances where you have a clear, like say the right holds up the principle of equality before the law, and where that is not applied, and the right has failed to live up to its own principles, it should be hammered. It should absolutely be hammered. It is ultimate hypocrisy to engage in such hypocrisy. But like it's double the sin for someone on the conservative side to do that, because they said, hey, these are these principles that we hold dear. Thus far shall I go and no further. This is what I consider to be the limit of power. And then when they go beyond that, that is, to me, the bigger sin than the abuse of power by, say, someone on the left who says, I recognize no legitimate end to my power. Well, okay, dude's doing what he said he was going to do. I can't blame him for that. Whereas I can blame the conservative who does what he expressly promised me he would not do.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's been my biggest problem. Growing up, at one point, I started looking at the U.S. and going, you guys talk a great big games, about, Statue of Liberty, give me a poor, huddled masses, land of the free, the Star-Spangled Banner, hoorah, right? And just so much of what they do internationally and domestically, it is completely and utterly at odds with those values they claim to espouse, right? Yes. Starting with,
conservatives need to be held to a higher standard. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think the left needs to be held to a higher standard because that's what I expected of the left.
But leftists don't really do that. So.
Yeah, leftists don't really do that.
They used to.
Not their creed. So
they used to. They used to be about achieving a higher standard. It's how they define that higher standard. Here's what I've come to realize. I brought this up before.
Well, and can you elaborate on that a bit more before you move on? Can you flesh that out a bit?
Unionization. Unions back in the day.
Yeah.
Were activated
created.
No, there were activists working towards them.
Okay,
because they were required, because child labor, because health and safety standards, fair wages, right?
Yep.
Fast forward 100 plus years, very different conversation. But back then, that's where I see the left. And that's why the left still embraces unionism.
Okay. But what do you mean they held themselves to a higher standard back then as compared to, say, I'm assuming you're talking about as compared to now.
as compared to now. So like I said, I'm cutting things off at 15 years because that's
So what was that higher standard?
it was we as a society
Yeah.
needs to be doing better. We need to be taking care of our
The disadvantaged,
our loss of
the
our huddled
unfortunate.
masses.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
we need
Yeah.
to be taking care of that. We need to up our standard of living across the board.
Okay.
Raise the minimum standard for everyone so that
And you feel that they're not living up to those principles now?
no. And I'll tell you why. Right?
This is the left you're talking about.
This is the left. The left, this is where the left
is
lost
interesting.
and the right won. And
Okay.
I brought this up before. But the event for me that kind of made me go, where the fuck are we going as a society? And I brought this up before, was the high school teacher in British Columbia who is anti-abortion, he's pro-life, who was a social studies teacher, and he was teaching about democracy and how democracy works in his classroom. And he said, for example, I am pro-life. But because I live in a democracy and the majority of the people in our country are pro-choice, right, my opinion does not prevail, right? And that's as far as he got because some little shit in his class freaked out. Oh my God, he said that he was pro-choice.
Or pro-life.
Or pro-life.
Yep.
Right? And this teacher got censored. He had to apologize.
Right.
Right? That was my first, what the fuck?
Your first inkling of the left maybe had gone off the rails?
Yeah, like how stupid. The guy was doing his job.
Yeah.
You want to talk about certification? This guy was hired to do a job, and he was doing it exactly right. He was teaching what democracy is about. I have an opinion. It's not the prevailing opinion.
Yep.
My opinion is not law.
Yep.
Right? I don't agree with that, but oh well. Right? And this is where our society went with it, right? And
Or
everything
it's where
else,
the left went with it.
everything else,
Yeah.
goofy
Yeah.
in our society has more or less, for me, started with that one. I
When
was like,
was that roughly?
It couldn't have been that long ago.
No, it's long
no,
enough
it
now.
might have been that
it
long
was,
ago.
It was pre-COVID.
It could have been 20 years ago.
No, it wasn't 20.
It could have been.
I think it was, I'm going to say it was about 8 to 10 years ago.
Yeah,
Because
to me that's not that long ago. right?
I've noticed a similar kind of shift, right? But I would also say that our society is very different now in that the left controls the institutions, in that the arts, the academy, the media, the public sector, the larger institutions, say in terms of say even law enforcement and the courts, penology, they are all dominated by left-wing modes of thought.
The courts
And
the courts are indirectly because of the laws,
yeah, sure.
right? I don't see
And
I
also-
don't see the cops being that way.
No, cops are different, but it's
well, it depends what we're talking.
and it depends what we're talking about,
Right,
because
'cause-
the police forces are being politicized now too.
Yeah, it's like the College of Policing in the UK is very,
yeah.
very, very
hard.
progressive.
Or like look
Hard
at, look at the Metropolitan Police.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
oh my god!
Like policing in the UK has become very
left.
Like
and look at the RCMP or say Metro Toronto Police compared to say, you know, like your average municipal force, say in say Calgary Police, right?
Yeah.
Very very different philosophies, right? But I would say that I have noticed these changes as well, but they've come. Here we go, post hoc fallacy. But I've noticed that these changes has come as left-wing ideas have dominated our institutions. And I'll throw this out for you to oppose. The left-wing approach, maybe not classical left, but maybe new left, is that if there is a view that I do not agree with, I want to silence that view and I don't want it to make it to the public square.
No, absolutely.
Whereas the traditional Burkean conservative view was, let's meet it in the public square and defeat it on the field of ideas.
Nobody's doing that anymore on either side, right? It's all about owning the other side.
Well, it's
Right?
about preventing the other side from getting their idea across. Like whenever you have, like for example, look at the difference between someone who doesn't like the CBC and someone who doesn't like Fox News. The one side is defund it. Like I don't want to have to pay for it. If you want to watch CBC, you pay for it. The other side is no, ban Fox News. Ban it. Don't, like, doesn't matter who pays for it. Don't even let them speak. There's two very different approaches to that. And, you know, what you were saying is, like with the example of the teacher, deplatform him. Don't let this guy, like, he holds these views. Don't let him into the public square. It's a very different approach to the same problem.
I'm going to separate those two things out for a second because for me, that example of what happened wasn't about. Give me a second here. I'm not.
I was going to get, okay, Steve, give us some filler.
I'm not thinking that this is actually about. This isn't actually about deplatforming that guy. That's part of it, right? But again, it's, I guess, in juxtaposition is the guy was doing his job.
He was.
You know, so it's not just about
He wasn't beating the drum for saying like you should be pro-life too.
Yeah,
He was just saying this is what I am.
you know, this happens to be I'm just using this as an example.
As an example, yeah.
Of an opinion I'm entitled to.
But the reaction,
And then he was forced to defenestrate himself.
Yeah.
the reaction was remove this guy from the public square. It was thought crime. It was thought crime.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, hey,
but
it's okay to hold these views, but don't use your position as a bully pulpit to promulgate them. No,
Yeah.
that wasn't it. It was, you hold these views, therefore you are not fit for the public square.
But on the one hand, by somehow presenting it as him using as an opportunity to push his opinions on something, which he wasn't.
Yeah.
Right? On the other hand, we've got this squealy little weasel going,
Yeah. Well,
oh, the words bother me. Okay.
at
That's
some
a
point,
failure in parenting.
At some point, the activist left became Maoists, and then the institutional left became accommodating to the Maoists.
At some point or always, and they just
not
felt.
always.
No, honest question. At some point or always, and they just felt comfortable with expressing it.
Well, no. because
No, I think
not
at
all
some point.
leftists-
Okay.
Not all leftists are Maoists.
Yeah.
Well,
I
you're
think
not.
At some point.
You're not.
Oh, no. Internationalists are. Trotskyists are not Maoists.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. But
Or say authoritarian. That should have been what I said.
within
Trotsky, no.
the last decade, right? Like, because there was the big push for political correctness, which might have been the beginning of activist leftist Maoism in the 90s.
Yep.
That kind of got pushed back against, and there was kind of a
There
conservative
was a pushback.
retrenchment.
Yep. Tea Party.
Yeah. Around the turn of the century, and for decade, and then I think George W. kind of like squandered that.
Yeah, he did. Yep.
Because the Iraq War and the Afghanistan went on too long and stuff like
Yep.
that. And so I got standard. So then they became more research, and then they became
It translated.
the activists
yeah.
left started to act like they were in the Cultural Revolution.
They did win the Cultural Revolution, though. I think they did.
Sure.
I think they did. Again, they
No,
had
but
control of all the. Rudi Dutschke's long march through the institutions
Yeah.
was complete.
Sure. Yeah.
No,
yeah,
well, not complete because they still didn't have law enforcement.
Yeah.
But like they had the big ones that they wanted from the beginning: education,
cultural institutions,
the
education,
academy, media,
public
the
service.
arts. Yeah, and
I
the public
often,
sector.
I often find it fascinating that, because to me it stands to reason. It should not be unexpected that academia is typically left-leaning.
That's
Because
a very left statement.
it's where
Well, hold on. What do you mean left leaning? What does that mean?
academia
Yeah.
is where your creativity,
Yeah.
your freedom of expression
Yeah,
in
yeah.
all forms
Yeah. Follow the truth no matter where it leads.
Yeah, and
but find the truth.
we're talking art. We're talking
Yep.
in all its forms.
Yep.
Visual, sculpture,
Inquiry of any matter.
More
Yep.
than anything else.
But
you get that in prose, whether it's fiction or non-fiction.
Okay.
Right?
But is creativity by itself leftist?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm asking.
Right? Like you're saying this is
You
where
see
creativity
those-
goes
you
to
see those-
thrive, but
Sorry, Steve. Go ahead.
but is SpaceX is a creative enterprise?
Yeah.
Is that progressive or leftist?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. Is
like just because it's a company, but like the concept
Yeah.
of we're going to Mars.
Yeah.
And the company is how we actualize that.
Yeah.
Or-
Well, all companies have that creative element to them as well.
right.
But is what is it about creativity and the pursuit of truth?
Yeah.
And say I'll throw in natural intellectual curiosity.
This might be something I think that Peterson sometimes gets wrong because he always says like, yeah, this creativity, like companies need a leftist to come up with a vision and a conservative to run the thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I would.
And I don't know that's always true.
Yeah, I want to know. I don't want to come across as argumentative, but I want to know what
Too
is
late.
it. Yeah, I know.
You're the most argumentative person we know.
and it's a flaw. Like it is, and I'm aware of it. That's what makes it even more egregious.
You can't fool me. It's a finely crafted skill.
No, it causes problems. What is it that you see about those three concepts that you see as inherently left? And
Because
and
to me-
speak in like the most positive, idealistic terms here.
I like to answer that question first in my normal voice, and then in kind of
And then
high pitched whine.
PBS in your PBS documentary voice.
Well, and this is how I feel we keep getting sucked back into the vortex of our glossary episode, right?
A lot of stuff comes to it.
And our
A lot of stuff
and
comes
our
to it.
agreed or not yet agreed upon definition of all things left, right,
Yeah,
whatever.
What does
right?
it mean when we use these terms?
Because to me that has always been, and there are ironies to this, right? But this is what I love about Spain. When we talk about the Spanish Civil War, I love that because that's, I think, where we find conceptually our greatest common ground, right?
Like our episode where we talked about like what were those? I think we nailed it down to like 5 principles.
Yeah, there were 4 or 5 principles.
Yeah,
what were they fighting for?
The golden age.
What was
from that
what was the left
32 to
fighting
34.
for there?
Yeah.
What made the left the good guys in
Yeah.
that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And
So-
it's significant to
Yeah.
me.
Speak from that spirit when you answer this.
It's significant to me that so first of all, it was democratically elected government, right? And it was the military, traditional rightists.
I don't want to go
came
down that
fight
hole.
it. No, I get it. I'm going somewhere with
Yeah.
this, right?
I'm going somewhere. Bear with me.
The proliferation,
Yep.
and this speaks so many
Okay,
truths,
okay.
but the proliferation of artists of all types, but mostly writers,
Yeah.
predominantly writers, that ended up fighting for Republican Spain in the international brigades, I find very telling.
Yeah.
Right? You had W.H. Auden, you had George Orwell. Now, George Orwell
Yeah.
was the most significant one.
Right.
Because he came out with 2 books.
Right. They were seminal
Yeah, that came out
of
of
the
that and went,
experience
okay,
of the 20th century.
here's the problem with communism, right? Stalinism, essentially.
Yeah.
Which was fair, which needed to happen, right? But
Yeah.
but that's what I'm saying. It's that to me is a great example of how free thinkers are considered the left, and they are fighting against an oppression that is the right, and that really kind of fundamentally for me sums up the differences between left and right.
How could we distill that down to a thesis?
Yeah, because I'm still confused.
You're still confused.
I'm still confused.
So
Like
what
what
you're
you-
saying is you've always
I-
been confused and you're still confused.
Oh, my girlfriend tells me I'm confused all the time.
That you're confused or she's confused?
Oh, that I'm confused. She has absolute clarity.
There's no confusion on anything.
Yeah,
Can we hold on to Steve's confusion as
take a dart
holding point? Yeah, let's if we can take a quick break.
Yeah, sure.
All right.
I should have brought
back in a bit.
I should have brought a coffee. I should have brought one of those instant 3-in-1s. Because it's simple. We can remember it.
So we
Now
are
we're recording. Yeah, we're back.
Oh, yeah, we're back.
And we're trying to remember what I was confused about.
Yeah.
And we're having trouble.
It was about why creativity and the pursuit of truth, wherever it leads, is inherently left.
Leftist, right. Explain it to me, Trent.
Yeah, put you on the spot with absolutely no chance to prepare whatsoever.
Explain me.
You bastard.
Well, again, this has always been my
Son of
sense
a rotten, dirty pinko.
that that freedom of thinking, because conservatism again itself, it defines itself in terms of saying, okay, this is what's acceptable and what's not, right? These are the rules. You're going to work within the rules,
Like a paradigm.
right? So creativity is naturally stifled in that. Artists, do I have proof of this? Like, what am I going to point to? Like,
We're
artists,
asking for your gut, Trent. We don't
artists,
need proof.
in my experience, artists have always been to the left, right? So that's why in your liberal arts department, liberal arts,
So is
of any given university, that's typically where your leftist, quote unquote, your liberal thought is your free thought is going to be.
Is that inherently true, or is that just a product of our own presentism bias? Like, as you're saying, it's within your lifetime, but has it always been thus? If we go back to, say, the Renaissance, or when you go back to the Renaissance, was it that way? Mind you, it's a very different thing to think in terms of left and right, what that represents in the Renaissance. And I don't want to go. You know what? Let me take that off the table. I don't want to get that. That's a rabbit hole. During the break, have we gone? Is there any further we can go with what inherently makes pursuit of truth, creativity, originality?
I don't want to pick on Steve because he's almost never speaking anyways, and he's actually, I love him and respect him and
Well,
but
that's
part of me,
not
Shit, no, piece of shit.
not get crazy.
Part of me just wants to do, Steve's sitting across the table from me, just like you are, Patty, and he always has been. So I'm not surprised he's confused. He's obviously confused. He's obviously always been confused.
Well, that's definitive.
But I'm just being a shit.
Yeah. So during the break,
that was just opening things up.
shall we move on to NATO?
Yeah, I think we might as well because
During the-
we've lost
yeah.
the momentum on the other thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, Steve.
During the break, we started talking, just for the audience, we started talking about the wrecking ball that Trump has taken to NATO and where we were going with that. And I was saying that I feel the Americans are on the horn of a dilemma. Trent disagrees.
No, I agree with the dilemma to a certain extent. But, to withdraw again, like when has isolationism ever worked for them and the world? I mean, they claim...
Well, how many times have they tried it? I know that there was an isolationist bent in America in the 1930s.
Well, there also was one prior to the First War.
They were... No, it goes back to the founding, right? Mm-hmm. The founding fathers had an isolationist bent right off the hop.
That's true. Yeah, they did.
Right off the hop. And then, but that went out the window right away because they needed the French to help them with the Revolutionary War, which the French did.
Yeah. But then after
there was
after 1789,
there was the big admonition right from the get-go to avoid foreign entanglements.
yes,
Right?
yes, that's true. So it was baked into their founding,
Yeah.
and then that
Who uttered that? Was that Washington?
was that Jefferson?
I think it was Jefferson.
It might have been
I think, but I
Now,
could
so the Monroe Doctrine comes in at about what, 1823?
Yeah, that's
Civil War?
That's Manifest Destiny, right?
Or just the idea that America would not tolerate European intrusion into the Western Hemisphere, or into certainly Central America, and to a lesser extent South America. But they would brook no European. Like, for example, I think it was the French invaded Mexico.
Yeah.
And this was what really alerted the Americans to say, like, no, Central America is what we consider strategic territory. We will tolerate no European interference there.
Yes. So Monroe articulated it in 1823.
Yeah.
There you go.
So, and was it in response to the French? So it's the entire Western Hemisphere. So that does include South America. Okay. And then, of course, the Manifest Destiny is kind of an extension of that.
Okay.
But again, it's dealing with the near abroad. It's not transoceanic.
Yeah.
Now, the Americans do kind of fade away from that when they start getting involved in the Pacific. When they start, I'd say the Spanish-American War is an extension of, as far as Cuba is concerned, extension of Monroe Doctrine.
Yeah, that's more Monroe.
But they also got involved in the Philippines.
Yeah, well, that was Spanish.
That was part of the Spanish-American War, yeah.
And that's definitely when the Americans kind of go abroad. And the Boxer Rebellion, they start
Boxer Rebellion was more, that was more of a capitalist power thing. You know? Like, that was,
but it's still the Americans
because they were only
going international. Right?
Yeah, but as one of many.
They weren't alone in it, right?
No,
that was
the Germans.
But the French and the Germans and the British were always
we're always that way.
Like the opposite of isolation.
They were the colonizers.
Yeah, they were
but
always imperialists.
The Boxer Rebellion. I mean,
Yeah.
first of all, it was kind of a small thing.
Sure,
But
it
also, I always found fascinating. It was like all the major players on either side of World War II.
Yep, we're all working together.
Yeah.
But it was like kind of like the Bismarckian idea of like Germany is our empire. We don't need overseas possessions. Germany will be our empire. America kind of had that Bismarckian view that we don't need overseas possessions. The United States, the continental United States, is our empire. And then that changed a little bit in the late 19th century. Like, I'm not saying this. I'm postulating this, and I'm asking for correction. It seems to me that they kind of changed that idea in the late 19th century, perhaps as the frontier closed and they had fully asserted control over the lower 48, the continental United States. Mm-hmm. And they began to express themselves in a more imperial nature.
Well, I mean,
right?
When was Teddy Roosevelt president? That was turn of the century.
Yeah, Teddy Roosevelt was president just
in the
prior,
1890s.
No. He was in the 20th century. He was prior to World War One.
Was he? You know, I'll look that up. You keep ordering that coffee there, my son. You're doing the Lord's work.
Well, because Roosevelt was a big advocate.
Let me see what I can find
for the Spanish-American War. He was pushing for it.
Because I thought he was like 1893-ish.
Nope, he was after the turn of the century.
He fought in the Spanish.
He's fought in the Spanish-American War.
Spanish-American War.
Yeah.
To charge up San.
You're looking. You're looking it up.
But he was president. I think he
1901 to 1909. There you go.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. 20th century guy.
Yep.
And I think the 20th century American isolationism was a response to the First World War, where they looked at the considerable loss of life that had been involved in that war, and there were a great many Americans who said, okay, why did we do that? Which of America's national interests were at stake in that war? And how did America benefit from that war?
Everything I've heard, or a lot of stuff I've heard, is that what actually tipped the balance there was that so many of the the Entente powers owed so much money to America or American companies that if they were to lose, it would be bad for the American economy.
Do you think that that was a possibility?
That's been presented as
I guess, because I don't.
The reason-
I don't think I know that Americans like to think of themselves as having tipped the balance in that war. I don't think that was actually the case. I think that the British naval blockade had basically sealed Germany's fate, and that without American involvement, the war might have gone on to 1919, maybe 1920. But Germany was done before the Americans came in. After the Somme, Germany was basically fighting for acceptable terms. That's my view.
Yeah, I don't know if I know enough about it.
But at any rate, I would say that the American isolationism of the 1930s and 20s was a response to the First World War.
Yeah, they didn't want to get dragged into it. But I mean, neither did a lot of the European powers, which is why they had the policy of appeasement they did for as long as they did.
Yeah, except the Europeans didn't follow a policy of isolationism. They couldn't. When you live in such proximity, you can only be isolationist in the United States and maybe Japan. But again, you're an island nation for all intents and purposes. Oh, damn, that was fast. They don't waste no time.
I have brown or organic raw.
Either one. The first one you grab is going to work. And just, stir stick. Sorry, the coffee just arrived like mere minutes after it was ordered on Steve's app. Like, holy cats, that's amazing. We live in a miracle time, Trent. Aside from Japan and maybe China went through an isolationist phase. But I cannot think of any other nation where isolationism was ever an option. I suppose Canada could have considered isolationism. It was certainly thought of, say, within Quebec by Maurice Duplessis in the Union Nationale era. But isolationism as a political phenomenon is largely American.
Yeah, it's an American. Well, it's most
American
often applied
concept.
to that. Yeah.
Because again, Japan stopped being isolationist after the Meiji Restoration.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well,
Japanese history has never been my thing.
Okay.
East Asian history.
Japan realized that it whether like it or not, it was a part of the modern world, and it could not wall itself off from, like in mid 19th century, that it could not wall itself off from interaction with the Europeans or the Western powers, like it or not. It was a part of the broader world, and it was going to have to accept that. Whereas China still tried to hold on to isolationism for a little bit longer. But of course, that was part of the Boxer Rebellion. And the Opium Wars, where China tried to hold that line and found out to its chagrin that it could not. But voluntary, this concept of isolationism is largely an American phenomenon. I think we can say that safely. That changed after the Second World War.
Well, after the Second World War, they'd been through two world wars that had both seen a massive industrialization and a booming of their economies as a result.
Is that a rag that I can use for little spills? Cheers. Keep going, Trent. I got wet cleanup on aisle 4.
So I think as a result of those, I think they did isolationism before this first war, found that they had to join the war. Their economy benefited from that. They industrialized. They retreated back into isolationism, probably, again, in reference to the foreign entanglements, again. Found out again that didn't work for them. Industrialized again. Booming economy came out of that. And then I think they realized that their place in the world, isolationism wasn't the way to go. Partly because they'd liberated all these places, and the places that they occupied as part of that
I also think they perceived a threat in 1945 from abroad that they had never perceived before.
Yeah, probably.
Like in the Soviet Union. There had never been a parallel to that in any time in American history.
Yeah, actually, the approaches, the perceptions of the Soviet Union as an enemy by virtue of communism, then an enemy as being allied with Hitler as part of the Nazi-Soviet pact, then all of a sudden it's an ally, and then
the gradual,
by the end of the war, what are we going to do about these guys?
The gradual realization by, say, 1947, that the Soviets are not their friends.
I don't know that it was gradual. Oops, I got myself muted. I don't know that it was gradual. That I think it kind of came about from Yalta.
Yeah.
When Stalin was just like, I'm taking this shit.
Yeah. Right. From what my studies of the period was that the Roosevelt administration was originally very, very friendly to the Soviet Union and actually quite sympathetic towards some of the methods and ideas and concepts of the Soviet Union, and that it the Soviet Union heavily influenced the New Deal.
Yes.
And that they saw common cause and partnership. Or there were a lot of people within Roosevelt's administration that really, really saw the Soviet Union as a partner. And they were extremely reluctant to abandon that ideal as facts to the contrary started coming in.
It wasn't, I think, until they were punched in the face metaphorically by the reality of who Stalin was.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the first Roosevelt administration was pre-Stalin, I think. Didn't Stalin take over in 1935?
Yes.
And the first administration was 1932.
32 or 33, yeah.
Well, yeah, he would take an office in 1933.
Yeah.
But they were heavily influenced, say by the new economic plan and what the Soviet Union was doing in terms of the state mobilizing economic resources. That it was a very, there was...
Plus the New York Times, in the form of Walter Duranty, was lying about what was going on inside the Soviet Union anyway.
Yeah.
So,
but it was seen as a new approach. It was seen as something novel and new and... something that was in line with classical progressive, say like Wilsonian ideas of harnessing the new the new technologies of communication. For example, the Dewey Decimal System, the typewriter, the telephone, the ability to transmit information electronically. These ideas suggested that the we could truly unleash the administrative power of the state to coordinate and plan in ways that were simply impossible in previous eras.
Well, not only that, you were at the time, 2 or 3 years into the Great Depression, so desperate times, desperate measures.
Yeah,
right?
by the time Stalin came in,
by the time.
Yep.
By the time Roosevelt came in,
Yep.
so he's looking, what are we going to do about this? And they've already had some examples. Okay, how do we feed the masses?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
How do we employ the masses?
Yeah. And as pointed out, what the Americans did know about the Soviet Union, as false as it was, they believed that, the Soviet Union isn't having these problems in terms of the Great Depression. This is only a malady afflicting capitalist systems. So maybe we should borrow from command economies, certain ideas. I mean, we have to look at it based on what they knew at the time. But back with the whole concept of isolationism.
Yeah. So fast forward to today,
or at least after the Second World War.
Okay.
I am really reminded of the 1956 Suez Crisis.
Okay.
In this.
Yeah.
Where. Nasser
nationalized the canal.
Takes over the canal. And it had been run by an Anglo-French consortium since its construction in the late 19th century.
Yeah.
Nasser takes it over, and he is threatening to levy large fines and fees and just block its usage outright to countries that, number one, are supporting Israel, and number two, not going to pay money for the Aswan High Dam. And he's really targeting Britain and France, like European nations, but Britain and France, who have the most traffic through that canal in particular. Britain and France take unilateral action. They coordinated with Israel, but they coordinated with nobody else, including the Americans. Nobody knew that they were doing this. And they do a combined airborne and naval assault to seize the canal. Textbook, works perfectly, works flawlessly. The Americans immediately and vehemently intervene. Now, the American justification was that, hey, Egypt is a Soviet client state. The Soviet Union is very upset. We don't want escalation. That's the American point of view. The European point of view is that the Americans were furious that what they considered subordinate states engaged in unilateral action without their permission. And of course, both Britain and France have very extensive loans out with the United States, where the United States threatens immediate and severe retaliatory economic sanctions. The British and the French must withdraw. They're humiliated. I believe it's Harold Macmillan is the prime minister. He resigns. It brings down the British government. Like it's a major.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a major event.
Because I thought it was a successful war.
Oh, well, the assault was successful.
Yeah, they seized the canal.
They seized the canal. But the Americans immediately made them withdraw with their tails between their legs. Yeah. This was the creation of UN peacekeeping forces and the creation of the Blue Helmet. In that, I believe it was Pearson.
Pearson was
at the time.
Yeah.
And he saw an opportunity for Canada to increase its presence on the world stage and also kind of assert its own independence as a separate actor outside of the British Commonwealth, and says, okay, we'll help contribute troops into this UN peacekeeping force, which is basically going to keep the Egyptians and the Israelis away while the British and the French withdraw. However, the problem is that Canadian uniforms were almost indistinguishable from British uniforms at the time. Canadian equipment was almost indistinguishable from British equipment. So how do you tell the Canadians from the British? Somewhere they found a warehouse with a bunch of light blue paint in it. And they just said, grab these helmets and we're going to paint them light blue because it's the immediate color that we have at hand. And it was just because some Egyptian contractor somewhere had a bunch of light blue paint that the blue beret became a thing for the UN peacekeepers. But that aside, it was the beginning of the absolute American hegemony in NATO. That NATO is an American show. NATO has always been commanded by an American general. And certain key functions have always remained exclusively within American control. Yeah. Number one, suppression of enemy air defenses. Only the United States has that capability. Logistical capability to move mass men and material across the Atlantic and across the North Sea and Baltic, exclusively an American capability. And the mass coordination of air power, an exclusive American capability. Or sorry, not that. That falls in the first one, suppression of enemy air defenses. It's air defenses in and of themselves. The ability, say, to protect the airspace from ballistic missile and drone threats. But at the time, it was when the technology was developed, it was thought only to ballistic missile. The United States has always controlled these three technologies and has not shared them, so that it would have complete executive control of NATO, so that it would be impossible for any other NATO state to undertake unilateral action. It was only with significant American aid that Britain was able to respond to the Argentinian attack in the 1982 Falklands War. that Britain essentially needed America's permission to undertake that war, because if America had decided that it valued its relationship with Galtieri more than it did with Thatcher, we'd be calling them the Illas Malvinas today. It seems this doctrine, it seems the Trump administration has renounced this doctrine.
I would say that, so first of all, if one's going to argue that, well, not everyone's been paying their way.
And that's true. That's true.
But the U.S. has insisted on these three critical things, saying we're going to leverage some significant, important authority
And capability.
over the rest of you guys.
Part of it is because of domestic U.S. law. Okay, there is legislation in place in the United States that says American troops cannot be placed under foreign command. So they always had to be Supreme Allied Commander if they were going to work for NATO. So the Supreme Commander of NATO had to be an American.
But it also worked, though, because, I mean, they were the
They wanted it, but
military
yeah,
power.
but that was part of the reason, right?
Like if the Danes came out and said, "Well, I'm sorry, we have to be Supreme Allied Commander because the Danish Constitution says that Danish troops cannot be under foreign command,"
Yeah,
everyone
no,
would have said,
they had
"You can go tamp Sam."
Yeah, no, only the Americans can get away with it, right? Like, I've never seen another country have customs officers in foreign countries, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you go through U.S. customs before you get on the airplane in Canada if you're flying to the United States, right?
Yeah.
And in a lot of other countries, you go through U.S. customs before you get on the airplane.
Before you get on the airplane.
Everywhere else, you go through customs after the plane, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Only the Americans can get away with that because they got the clout
right.
to back that up. If Belgium said, "Hey, we want to have customs officers in Pearson International," it's like,
Go fuck yourself.
go fuck yourself. Yeah.
So
Whereas,
to me, so there's no question that the rest of NATO, because probably that was it 2%, minimum 2%.
It was it was considered the floor of 2%, and nobody ever made it.
Very few people
Until
have it.
2022, nobody made it. Yeah.
So that may have been built into the fact that the U.S. gets all these other perks, right?
Well, I think,
and the fact that the U.S. spent so much on its defense.
Well, they were like what 3.5, 3.8.
I've always wondered what their numbers are.
I think it's around. It's not quite 4.
Yeah.
But it's like 3.5, 3.8,
Really?
something like that. Yeah,
That's
it's
all
just
they spend?
Their economy is that big.
Did you? Yeah. Well, yeah. That's the big deal. Is how the size of their economy.
Yeah.
Did you watch Perun's video last week?
No, the one about can Europe
Yes.
defend itself?
Yeah. The numbers are actually pretty interesting.
Yeah. I mean, Europe's economy is huge.
Yeah. So it turns out,
If they
basically, the rest of NATO
yeah,
is about equal to the United States' contribution, right?
yeah. If they were to all work together,
No, but
and-
even including like as it stands now, the rest of NATO
yeah,
pretty much equals the U.S.'s contribution.
like post 2022 numbers, not 2019 numbers.
Yeah, it was probably 2022 numbers that he was working with.
Or,
He was working with
like,
current numbers.
Yeah,
But-
like modern numbers.
and he's
yeah.
like, this is tricky because this includes Turkey and Greece.
right.
And so you try to get the Turks and the Greeks to work together for anything.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Right? But because the biggest land army, or the biggest, in terms of personnel, the biggest army other than the Americans is the Turks.
Yep.
So you need the Turks to make the manpower.
Yep.
You need the Greeks. The French and the Brits have the nuclear capability, but really only the French can use theirs independently because the Brits is pretty dependent on the Americans. Like the British ballistic missile submarines are all use Trident missiles, which are American.
And the Americans control the British deterrent.
Yeah.
So it's symbolic.
So the only independent nukes are the French. But then he started doing the numbers like if all the other NATO allies, because who was it? JD Vance was asking for like everybody should bump up to 5% or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. If everybody bumped up 5%, it would then the rest of NATO would be contributing what they contribute now plus double what the American contribution is.
Yes.
So it'd be almost like 2/3 of what the American contribution is.
Yeah.
And it'd be insane. So
so take this back to a Suez.
Yeah, the economic
scenario.
capacity is there, but
Yeah, is the will there?
The will is.
That's a good question. But let's say it was. Now, are you guys familiar with what's going on in the Congo right now?
Rwanda has invaded some of the
This is news to me.
richer the ore fields in the east.
Yeah.
And in conjunction with some rebels they support.
A rebel faction that has been taking shelter in Rwanda, largely, I believe, Tutsi-based. Like, again, it's an extension of tribal politics.
Always.
Is caused massive unrest and have seized large amounts of northern Congo.
Right.
Now, the odds that they could get all the way to
Kigali? No, Kigali's Rwanda.
Lagos?
No, Lagos is Nigeria.
Kinshasa?
Kinshasa.
Okay. The idea that they are going to get all the way to the capital and overthrow the government is a stretch, but they can certainly make the entire northern half of the DRC ungovernable. So the president of Congo has basically said, I am going to give a sweetheart rare earth minerals deal to anybody
Who can kick the
who intervenes and saves my bacon. Now, right now, that's the United States. Nobody else in the world is capable of expeditionary operations. Nobody else in the world.
China, Russia.
I bet
Russia can't because they're busy.
And not even China. They don't have the ability to get force there.
Right.
Now,
I bet Eben Barlow could pull it off.
but like, if Europe, say 15 years from now, if everybody in Europe is committing, say, 3.25%, and it's a combined legitimate effort, yeah, they could do that. And what if the United States says, well, actually, or say a Suez kind of situation, where the United States has the Middle East, which they consider essential ground in their interests, and then a third party, namely Europe, moves in and says, we feel that we want our interests protected, and we are going to intervene in a conflict where maybe the United States doesn't want any kind of intervention. Maybe they like the way it's sort of playing out already and say, you know what, let's just let this play out naturally the way it is, and we don't want any foreign involvement. And the Europeans say, well, we feel otherwise, and we are going to intervene. I think the United States is putting themselves in a situation where, if I could say, I'll call it the Suez Doctrine. Mm-hmm. The renunciation of the Suez Doctrine, I don't think is what they want over the long haul.
They don't know what they want. And if they were thinking long term, they wouldn't be doing any of the shit they're doing right now. The most realistic thing,
I guess, yeah. Or maybe it's a faction of American, this is what I'm saying. There are three different groups we got to talk about here, because they don't all act in, I'll say 4 different groups. They don't all act in concert. There's the MAGA guys, there's the Republicans, there's the Democrats, and then there's, say, the American people. And the MAGA guys are acting in what they think is the right idea. But I don't know.
That's why I'm saying the population of the U.S. are a bunch of idiots, a bunch of assholes for inflicting this on our. Do what you want to yourselves, right? And fuck y'all for doing it, because you're taking us all with you, right?
Who is that Italian politician who said that American politics is far too important to just be left up to Americans?
I don't know. Machiavelli?
No, it's a 20th century guy, like a 1960s guy. But yeah, this is kind of a case.
Aldo Moro.
Aldo Moro. Yeah.
He's the only one I can name, right?
Yeah.
It didn't end well for him. Yeah, I don't think they're thinking any of this through, right? The closest thing I've come to, like, this might actually be planned, that I can believe in, is on the one hand, this is just Trump doing his. This is how he does the art of the deal, quote unquote, which is a book he didn't even write, apparently. It was all ghost written,
probably,
right? And based on nothing that he ever said or did. But supposedly, so this is him just keeping people,
on edge.
He's throwing curveballs, making people dodge them and stuff like that. And in the meantime, a bunch of billionaires are buying up stock now that the because of tariffs, now that the stock market is tanked, right? And looks like we're not going to do tariffs. The billionaires are all of a sudden even multi-billionaires now. They've got even more money than they used to have, right? That's the only realistic thing I've heard so far, because nothing else makes any sense at all.
The day traders aren't buying stocks. Only billionaires are buying the stocks now that they're low, or what? I'm not familiar with this theory.
Like, I'm just saying, it's a bunch of
That he's deliberately
rich,
taking
he's
theories-
deliberately tanking the stock market so that a bunch of people that he knows.
Okay, in other words, they were poised with liquid capital, ready
Yeah.
to go. So he said, "Okay, I'm going to do."
Am I
this.
saying this is happening? No, but it's the only thing that makes the only thing that anyone's put out there that
I will
makes any
never.
rational sense.
The day that I criticize you for engaging in conspiracy theories is the day Satan skates to work, because I love a good conspiracy theory.
You're conspiratorial.
Oh, I love them, dude. I can't get through I couldn't get through the week without a good conspiracy theory.
I have to admit, it's
I love
hanging
it.
out with you two clowns.
I love them.
There's something about like bald middle-aged white men loving conspiracy theories.
Well-
right? Like because it's a very
Hey,
Rogan-esque thing.
Well, you know
His
what?
head is shaved.
I will say
So
that
is this one, but it's bald.
I think it's a coping mechanism.
Probably.
When things go on in the world that don't seem to make sense and that I don't understand, it makes me feel better to believe that there is a plan, even if it's incredibly nefarious and diabolical. Yeah. I still take comfort in knowing that this is at least intended, as compared to just random action and rank incompetence.
Yeah.
That's far more frightening, I think, for someone to like, this is all completely just happening because of idiocy, or that's not a word.
Idiocracy?
Yeah, idiocracy and chance. That's truly frightening. So a conspiracy theory is actually a comforting thought.
Yeah,
in the alternative.
That there's intention behind what's happening as opposed to it's just
happening.
So
happening out of
you've got Josh on speed dial. Then.
Every day, man. Every day we meet for coffee. We compare notes.
But
by the way,
I kind of wonder if anybody has come up, like, because I don't know if we talked about it on microphone, but about a year ago, Patty articulated his thoughts about how this kind of American retrenchment, is that the right word? Retreat?
Yeah.
Is likely lead down a path that will result in a terrorist detonating a nuclear weapon inside the United States within probably 15 years.
Yes, and I will add, I haven't read it, but I understand the Rand Corporation has published a paper with this same thesis.
Right.
So that this is not just me being crazy.
So you're suing.
It's other people being crazy.
No, I'm totally taking credit, riding that delay.
But-
Before we go any further on this,
I don't know if we should articulate the mechanism by which this happens.
I just want to say that a certain comment on Facebook about calling a certain somebody the silo arsonist of Bruderheim. I just wanted to say, when I first read that, I thought this is either a Kyle MacLachlan film project or a Jethro Tull reunion album.
I think Jethro Tull more than anything. But yeah.
Trent won the internet with that statement. But anyway, go on. About
So basically, the theory goes that the American retreat results in essentially the end of nuclear nonproliferation.
Right.
That is starting with probably Ukraine and Poland and the Baltics, maybe working on a cooperative project, build up their own nuclear arsenals.
Right, because
seeing this,
yes, the idea that collective security, around the world, everyone understands there is no collective security. Everyone is on their own.
Yeah, and the only way you don't get fucked with is if you have a bomb.
That's right, because there's no way a nation like Estonia or Finland or Vietnam could compete conventionally with their larger, more aggressive neighbors.
Yeah, so the way I envision it is probably like, let's say, the Poles, Ukrainians, the Baltics started off, then the Japanese and
South Korea
and Vietnam and the Philippines decide they need them too.
And this is key, the Gulf Emirates, who live in the shadow of Saudi Arabia and Iran.
Right.
And Sorry, go on.
So anyway, all these nations develop
Mm-hmm.
independent nuclear weapons programs or cooperative nuclear weapons programs,
And
somebody
and that's
lose-
what I think happens.
Yeah, and somebody doesn't have as good a security as possible, or as could happen. The Saudis might want their own bombed
Yep.
to threaten the Iranians because
Yep.
the Iranians are working on theirs. And if you can't stop the Iranian nuclear weapons program, well, then what do you do if you're Saudi Arabia?
What do
You get
do,
your
sir?
own.
You get your own.
So
You cannot depend on the United States.
somebody,
I think that's the most important statement
Yep.
coming out of
Right.
the last 2 weeks. You
So-
cannot depend on the U.S. No one can for anything.
So
And
somehow one of these bombs finds its way into terrorists' hands, and those terrorists smuggle it inside the continental United States, and kablooey, Indianapolis goes up.
Yep.
Indianapolis. Why do you think they'd aim from Indianapolis?
The greatest spectacle of motorsport. The Indianapolis 500, motherfucker.
I'm sorry. I don't know. how
Ain't
we
nothing better than pussy. Except maybe the Indy 500.
How
I don't
did
know.
we not realize that?
No, I just picked. I picked Indianapolis at
No,
random, but
I stand corrected. I was thinking Washington or New York.
but if you
It's
if
gotta
you
be New
wanted,
York.
it's Indianapolis.
no, but if you literally
Indy 500, baby. It's ironclad.
either the Indy 500, Daytona 500, because you cannot get bigger crowds at any sporting event anywhere. Football stadiums don't hold as many people as
That's
Daytona
true.
Motor Speedway or
That's
the
true.
Indianapolis. Like you can get almost
So,
a
yeah.
500,000 people at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
If you're
for the Indy
talking,
500.
yeah, but that's it on a conventional weapon. If we're talking a, say, 10 kiloton nuclear weapon, any
Doesn't
city,
matter.
pick a city.
yeah.
So yeah, in
No,
that
but
case,
I just picked. I just picked. But if you want to talk opportunities for mass casualties, but I just picked Indianapolis at random.
and you know what? I'm not going to dispute your logic, especially with the vehemence with which it was presented. I know where my safety lies. I would like to
Away from crowds.
Add, I think the kicker for this is going to be in the Middle East, in that there are nations who have the technology to build a nuclear weapons program, but who do not have the economies to fund it.
Yeah.
Whereas this is where the Gulf states really come into play. They have the money to
economies.
fund it,
Yeah.
but they do not have the technology.
Yeah.
So they can go to a country like Estonia, South Korea,
Yeah.
and say, hey, you have the technology. We'll bankroll you, but in return,
We get some.
we get a warhead.
Yeah.
Or 2 or 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And I think this is even more prescient now because if Ukraine survives, they have the technology.
Yeah.
They've got reactors, like already.
Mm-hmm.
And they have the survivors in Ukraine will be very angry with the United States.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, they're already pissed because, going back to the Treaty of yada yada from 1991, when
The Budapest Memorandum.
they gave up their nuclear weapons for guarantees of security, which one of the
were not
co-signees
worth
has
Yep.
violated, and the rest haven't lived up to.
Yeah. Well, there was only 2, Russia and America. And look what happened.
I thought Britain was in there too.
No, it was Russia and America were agreed to guarantee Ukrainian security. Well, look what happened there.
Yeah.
So if you are Taiwan, if you are South Korea, if you are Jordan,
Yeah.
like
Who's Jordan threatened by?
well, just all
Iran.
of their neighbors. Syria on one side, Iraq on one side, Iran on the other side.
Their own
Saudi
domestic
Arabia.
population.
Yeah, the Palestinian refugees. Like who's Jordan not threatened by? We're like they're in a Fort Apache over there.
I think the actually the biggest threat for a bomb getting loose is probably the Saudis, because the Saudis are not a politically
Right.
homogenous group.
Right? Who in the Middle East is?
No, exactly.
Right.
But the Saudis, given that it's the extreme elements of Saudi society
Yes.
that fund and bankroll the large
Yes.
portions of Islamic terrorism globally,
Yep.
all they need is one guy or a
they
couple
need is one
guys
guy.
inside their nuclear weapons program to
All they need is one.
to smuggle
All
stuff.
you need is one warhead.
yeah.
And this is why I'm kind of saying that that's why I said, even in 2022, when it looked like the Biden administration was willing to let Ukraine die a slow death, that if the United States lets Ukraine fall,
Yeah.
they are signing their own death warrant with, say, a 15 to 20 year expiry date.
Yeah.
And if anything, I am more adamant in that opinion. Like nothing in recent events has made me
Exactly.
change my mind.
It's being reinforced.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought you were a little nuts when you first voiced it. Now I'm like, yeah, you're probably right.
Right on. See, look at this. Just converting the masses one bald guy at a time.
Hey. Now, if we just get people to listen to this podcast.
Wait. Speaking of which, what are our numbers at?
Oh, you want numbers?
Oh, God. Why do you do this to yourself, Trent?
I'm not just doing it to me.
Touche! But
Take
I
me
will
now
say,
with me.
I don't think, even with this American assistance, I don't think the Russians can win. I don't think they can. I think it has gone on too long, or to say, look at this strictly from a Russian perspective. The Americans waited too long to show their hand, or the Americans waited too long before coming to Russia's help, in that they have lost too many men and too much equipment, and their economy is too far gone that even with the Americans openly on their side, even if the Americans were to, like, there's not much more the Americans can do to help the Russians, short of like just actually sending them cash payments. And number one, I can't see them doing that.
Yeah.
That would be too risky, even for Trump. They can't send them arms and material because Russia has no capacity to use American equipment. No. So they can't do that. They could drop all sanctions against the Russians, but the amount of trade that Russia did with America is so tiny, it's not going to move the needle on the Russian economy. So long as the Europeans keep their sanctions in place against the Russians. Like, you're changing a couple percentage points if the Americans open up.
I don't know if you...
But that's it.
Because if the Americans drop their sanctions, then the Americans drop sanctions enforcement.
Yeah.
And how else... Okay, so the Ghost Fleet...
Yeah.
Which is clandestine transporting resources now.
They were already... Yeah, okay, so they openly transmit resources.
Yeah, but now they do it free, and now they can do it in US bucks, right?
Yeah,
that's their biggest
okay.
problem, right?
Yeah.
But Russia has a lot of rupiah, and they have a lot of...
And the Europeans have means of... Like, the Europeans control the insurance.
Yeah, but if such...
So... And the other thing is the Europeans can start taking retaliatory measures against India in other ways, right? So it's influential.
As soon as the Russians can start doing trades in U.S. currency,
do you think it's gonna open up their economy?
I think being able, because it's the fact of currency. It's the biggest challenge they have right now is they're getting oil money in currencies that they can't use anywhere. They can't spend anywhere.
Yeah,
right?
they can't do anything with because they're not part of the international.
As soon as they got U.S. bucks, as soon as they can start transacting in U.S. dollars, then
I guess,
but that's a big deal.
Do you think it's going to be enough?
No, I think the manpower issues are the big.
That's what I mean,
right?
and their equipment issues,
and their economic situation as far as like all their defense contractors are slowly going broke because it's costing them more than what they're paying.
The best numbers I have seen is that they run out of their Soviet era stockpiles of AFEs and AFEs and IFEs, armored vehicles and infantry fighting vehicles. They run out of their Soviet stockpiles in July.
Right.
They run out of their stockpiles of artillery. They've already exhausted their self-propelled artillery stockpiles. Right. That they run out of their towed artillery. And
you're talking about the the firing barrels, or you're talking about ammunition?
Stockpiles of the firing barrels.
Of barrels.
Really?
In July. Like the Soviet stockpiles that they've been building up since the 1960s. And
so
they
are they losing them to to casualties, to hits, or they're just wearing them out? They're wearing them out.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The artillery ones, they're wearing out the barrels.
It's an artillery-centric army, remember, right?
Yeah.
So
they have been at height. They were firing over 10,000 rounds a day.
Wow.
Now there are only 2 plants in Russia that can reline barrels. Only one of them is operating because the machinery needed to do it is broken, and all the parts come from Sweden. And the Swedes aren't releasing them. Yeah. So they have one factory that's able to refurbish artillery barrels.
And if it breaks.
And the other problem is, and this is something I think you'll appreciate, is that when you run a plant flat out and you say, okay, we're going to go from 5 8-hour shifts a week, and now we're going to run 24/7 indefinitely. Yeah. You get a sharp spike in productivity, and then it plateaus, and then it begins to decline. Because your machinery, you're not doing maintenance on your machinery. You're just doing nothing but production. Parts begin to wear out. Workforces get exhausted. Your labor force is really happy to take in all of that extra overtime for about 8 months. And then after that, they start getting tired. And then they start making mistakes. Your quality control starts going down. Your effectiveness of that machinery starts going down. So Russia is already on that downward trajectory with its existing war plans. Right. They are able to, now, just to finish the point, we project late August they run out of main battle tanks in their stockpiles of Soviet equipment. So that leaves them with what they were able to produce now. I don't have the numbers for artillery, but again, it's not very big because they got one plant able to do it. And it's splitting its production between repair of existing models and new manufacture. They can build about 30 main battle tanks a month. That's about the most they can do. And that's right now, and it's going to decline with time.
That many? I thought it was even lower than that.
Yeah, they're probably going to be down to mid-20s by autumn of 2025. Mm-hmm. The other thing is they are now at a break-even point on their recruiting. Mm-hmm. They are running out of Siberians, in that they have been bringing in about 40,000 people a month, but they're losing about 30,000 a month. Right. And their numbers are now dropping. Like through 2024, they were bringing in about 40,000 guys, and it kind of spiked a little bit with the Kursk incursion. Yeah. But they're now down to around 29,000 a month that they're bringing in. They've closed several prisons because they just don't have enough inmates to keep them open anymore. They've exhausted their convict population. Mm-hmm. They are running out of, Putin is desperately trying to protect that classical ethnic Russian demographic that lives west of the Urals.
Right.
That's off the table. And I don't think he can bring that in because, again, number one, he needs to protect it for the war he wants with Western Europe in the next 5 to 7 years. Mm-hmm. Number two, this war is just not politically popular enough to allow him to tap into that demographic. When you look at the unrest that occurred in that first involuntary reserve call-up in late 2022, when it was obvious that the war is going to last longer than, say, 3 weeks. Yeah. And they did that first call-up. There was a huge...
And everybody skedaddled.
There was a huge pushback in Russian society. Yeah. And so Putin knows he cannot do a mass involuntary call-up. There was also some conscripts. In order to free up combat troops, they were using their annual conscripts for border security. Mm-hmm. A large number of these guys were killed, and about 150 of them were taken prisoner in the first opening days of the Kursk offensive. Mm-hmm. This had massive backlash within Russia.
Oh, wow.
So Putin can't really... It's not that he won't. I'm saying, I don't have any backing for this. This is my assessment. He can't tap into that.
No, because politically,
west of the
that's
Urals,
what
Russia. Yeah.
that's the whole unspoken deal. Mm-hmm. You keep us safe and happy, we'll continue to let you be in power.
And it's when these mass casualties start coming into Moscow, Leningrad, Yekaterinburg, when it starts coming, Volgograd, when it starts coming into these cities, that's when I confuse them easily. That's when Putin's stability starts to decline. And Putin is not willing, his number one goal in all things is his own safety, prestige, and power.
Yeah.
That's the only thing he's been consistent in since 1991. So Russia, this war ends in summer 2025. No matter what happens, no matter what Trump does, no matter what Trump doesn't do, this war ends in that time period. And I think the Russians know that. Mm-hmm. And that's why they're all in. They've been all in since December.
So what is the situation on the ground? Because I stopped paying attention.
As the latest news, the Russians have begun a massive attack within Kursk. Their attempt is to envelop the Ukrainian
salient.
The Ukrainian salient, and trap those Ukrainian forces by getting in around behind them. And there's one main hardened highway leading into Sudzha, which is that Russian city that the Ukrainians captured very early on in the first day, and kind of cutting that and trapping the Ukrainians in a pocket and then reducing them from there. That's their big movement. They've had 3 main thrusts up in addition to that. Number 1 is Kupiansk in the north along the border of the Luhansk and Kharkiv oblasts. Kupiansk is a major logistical hub and a major city on communications and transport routes. There's the Oskil River runs north-south through Kupiansk. The Russians have been trying to get across, or at least up to, the Oskil River because it is a natural kind of boundary in anticipation of
peace talks
or of a ceasefire coming. But they want to get on the other side and hold Kupiansk because it is a major kind of hub. So they've got bridgeheads over the Oskil north of the city, but they've been able to do this. The Russians are not good at river crossings. They've been able to do this because the river was frozen, and they were able to bring infantry across on foot. They haven't been able to get a lot of vehicles over. Yeah. And now that the weather is changing, and the ice is not as predictable and as dependable as it was before, their offensive against Kupiansk from the north has stalled. In the center, down in Luhansk, there are 2 main cities, Pokrovsk and Toretsk. Toretsk is, again, it's part of a flanking maneuver on the main Ukrainian defensive in the center of Luhansk. You've got 4 major cities. You've got Seversk, Verkhnyokamyansk, I think that's the name of it. Zhankoy, I think maybe it starts with a D, and then Konstantinsk, I think. It starts with the name Konstantin. 4 major cities that are all lined up north to south. They are heavily fortified. The Ukrainians have known that the battle was going to come to them since summer 2022, and they are a massive kill zone. The Russians don't have the manpower to just smash through them the way they did, say, trying to go through Seversky Donetsk. So they're going to try and go around them and outflank the Konstantin city. Forgive me, listeners, I can't remember the suffix to that city. Toretsk is the linchpin on that turning movement. They took about 90% of they took about 90% of that city, and then the Ukrainians last week started launching a series of counterattacks, which are threatening to cut off large numbers of Russian troops into pockets. So now what they thought was in the bag is not at all. And the entire situation in Toretsk, from the Russian point of view, is in doubt. And so they're pulling troops from other sectors where they were having success to try and reinforce and hold on to Toretsk and stabilize the situation there, which is quite grave. Moving further south is Pokrovsk, which is, again, a very important logistical hub. If you sever the road and rail lines in Pokrovsk, you jeopardize the entire Ukrainian eastern flank around Toretsk. More importantly is the economic importance of Pokrovsk. It holds a very, very important coke production facility that Ukrainian steel production depends on. The amount of, I think, coke that comes from Pokrovsk is something like 80% of the Ukrainian steel industry. So if you can take Pokrovsk and deny that, you paralyze the Ukrainian war economy. So this is an incredibly important target for the Russians. And they have been working towards this, slowly, steadily grinding towards it all the way from mid-2024. And it has been a graveyard of the Russian army.
But are they making progress?
The steady, slow, grinding progress, but it's not fast enough. They're losing 100 guys for every meter they take. Literally. So they abandoned the idea of frontal assault on Pokrovsk and instead moved towards envelopment. But the Ukrainians have, in fact, and again, this is the big difference between the last time the Russians were on the offensive when the Americans stalled the aid deal to the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are counterattacking. And they are making inroads on the Russian positions. So what the Ukrainians will do is they will hold a position. They'll make the Russians take it. They'll attrit, the Russians will lose 10,000 guys trying to take like a 1 kilometer frontage area. And then the Ukrainians will pull back 800 meters. And so then the Russians move in new guys. And then the Ukrainians counterattack and retake that position. And so then the Russians lose another 10,000 guys to take it. The Ukrainians are willing to trade 100 meters at a time if they can inflict like 7-1 casualties on the Russians. They're willing to do that. The Ukrainians have learned their lesson. They're using the NATO way of warfare, or the Western way of warfare, which is mobility-based. Do not allow yourself to get decisively engaged and attrit the enemy for every step forward he takes. Or they're kind of using the same kind of tactics that the Germans used against us in Italy, actually, in that you establish a defensive position, the Russians lose thousands and thousands and thousands of guys just trying to identify where the Ukrainian fighting positions are. And so then they maneuver forces to take them out, and then you simply withdraw those forces before they can decisively engage them. And then the whole process starts over again. So the Ukrainians conserve manpower, which is their critical factor, while attriting maximum losses on the Russians. Further south, around Chromove and Velika Novosilka, where the Ukrainians were the weakest because they were putting the majority of their resources in those fronts I've already mentioned, the Russians were making rapid progress, 4 or 5 kilometers at a time. But that's where the Ukrainians have lots of ground. It's not strategic. The worst thing that can happen is the Russians hit the Dnieper, which they cannot cross. So the Ukrainians were more than willing to trade ground there in order to heavily attrit the Russians elsewhere. And now the Russians have had to pull troops away from the Zaporizhia, Kherson kind of theaters and move them up north to Luhansk and Donetsk to reinforce their efforts there, where they've stalled everywhere along the front.
So bottom line, they don't have the manpower or equipment to last past June, July, August.
Can you pan up, Steve? If I don't get the names of those cities right, it's going to drive me nuts. Kramatorsk, Seversk, then Kramatorsk.
Where?
Then, yeah, and then zoom in. You need to get closer on that. Okay. You got to zoom out. That's a bit too far. Okay, so there's Kramatorsk. Seversk is north of, or sorry, not Seversk, Slovyansk. Seversk is even further north. To the northwest is Seversk. Slovyansk, then Kramatorsk, and then Drushkivka. I think that's what it is underneath that blue dot. I think that's Drushkivka.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Konstantinivka. That's the name of it right there. Now, if you go a little bit further south, you see what Chasiv Yar is with the AK-47 on it? Nope, next one up. Next dot there. Yeah. Chasiv Yar, that battle, which is a continuation of the Bakhmut battle, was again to win the approach to Konstantinivka and Drushkivka when they still were on the idea that we're going to do a frontal assault on the Ukrainian fortress belt. When you say the fortress belt, we mean that massive line of constant, you can't outflank that big north-south line of urban terrain. So back when they were thinking they were going to do a frontal assault on it, that was the whole point of Bakhmut. That was the whole point of Chasiv Yar, was to gain the approaches to Konstantinivka and Drushkivka. Well, the Russians have kind of abandoned that now and are thinking more that they want to outflank it from the south. And that's where the battle for Toretsk comes in.
Okay. So
it's not going well for the Russians.
by June, July, August, you're saying they run out of men and equipment.
Mainly equipment. But they're not at the bottom of the barrel, but they can see it from here. Mm-hmm. Like they won't have run out of people by the summer, but they're going to see the end of the line of recruits coming in. So and the other thing is Russian interest rates are now at 21%. Their economy is starting to like, again, this is part of the deal. You keep us prosperous and safe, and we won't, throw you out of power. They are at the limits as to what a peacetime economy can bear. Mm-hmm. And they're showing signs of, they're feeling that acute worker shortage in that most of what would be their cheap available labor is going into the military. And they've been funding their military purely through financial incentives. The amount of money that they are paying these soldiers is 5, 6, 7 times what they would make in the economy. And that's been the whole way of, it's essentially a Siberian mercenary army, really. The only way they can keep these numbers in is by paying huge amounts of money, basically saying, we're paying you enough to die. Huge amounts of money to these very economically stressed areas in Siberia. But this is raising hell with the rest of the labor price in Russia. So there's a shortage of workers who can do these industrial jobs, which your defense industrial base depends on. They've lost a lot of their young skilled tech workers, like almost like, what is it, 800,000, who fled Russia during that first call up, who haven't come back. He's stayed abroad because they are afraid of another mass call up. Yep. And they're at the same time, there's a hyper nationalist background, cultural background to this, which is incredibly hostile to the idea of Central Asian migrants coming into Russia to fill these vacant labor positions. So I guess maybe what they were doing in 2022 was importing labor to handle those vacancies. That's now culturally off the table. So the Russian economy is kind of consuming itself, I guess, right? So about economically, I don't think they can carry on.
All right, then. Gents, I'm going to have to leave it at that. I got to get going.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Hopefully it's not 5 weeks before the next one.
Yeah, and hopefully we have better news.
Yeah. All righty.
What's today? Today's the 9th?
8th.
9th.
Yeah. 9th already. Good God. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's Sunday.
So in 3 weeks, I'm going to be in Niagara on business. So maybe 2 weeks from now.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.
Ciao.